The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Today on the Thom Hartmann Book Club with Thom Hartmann University, we're reading from what is apparently Donald Trump's second favorite book. His number one, according to his first wife, as I recall, was the collected speeches of Adolf Hitler, which was on his bed next to his, or on his bedstand next to his bed for years. But when he was asked by reporters his favorite book, he said P.T. Barnum's The Art of Money Getting, or Golden Rules for Making Money. So I thought, hey, let's check this out. This is from the introduction. Those who really desire to attain an independence, but have only to set their minds upon it and adopt the proper means, as they do in regard to any other object which they wish to accomplish, and the thing is easily done. But however easy it may be found to make money, I have no doubt many of my hearers will agree it is the most difficult thing in the world to keep it. The road to wealth is, as Dr. Ben Franklin truly says, as plain as the road to the mill. It consists simply in expending less than we earn. That seems to be a very simple problem. Mr. Micawber, one of those happy creations of the genial Dickens, puts the case in a strong light when he says that to have an income of £20 per annum and spend £20 and 6 pence is to be the most miserable of men, whereas to have an income of only £20 and spend but £19 and 6 pence is to be the happiest of mortals. Many of my readers may say, we understand this. This is economy, and we know economy is wealth. We know we can't eat our cake and keep it also. Yet I beg to say that perhaps more cases of failure arise from mistakes on this point than almost any other. The fact is, many people think they understand economy when they really do not. True economy is misapprehended, and people go through life without properly comprehending what that principle is. One person says, I have an income of so much, and here's my neighbor who has the same, yet every year he gets something ahead and I fall short. Why is it? I know all about economy. Well, he thinks he does, but he does not. There are many who think that economy consists in saving cheese parings and candle ends. Keep in mind, this was written in the late 1900s. In cutting off 2 pence from the laundress's bill and doing all sorts of little mean, dirty things. Economy is not meanness. The misfortune is also that this class of persons let their economy apply in only one direction. They fancy that they are so wonderfully economical in saving a half penny where they ought to spend 2 pence that they think they can afford to squander in other directions. A few years ago, before kerosene oil was discovered or thought of, one might stop overnight at almost any farmer's house in the agricultural districts to get a very good supper. But after supper, he might attempt to read in the sitting room and would find it impossible with insufficient light from just one candle. The hostess, seeing his dilemma, would say, it is rather difficult to read here in the evenings. The proverb said, you must have a ship at sea in order to be able to burn 2 candles at once. We never have an extra candle except on extra occasions. Those extra occasions occur perhaps twice a year. In this way, the good woman saves $5, $6, or $10 in that time, but the information which might be derived from having an extra candle would, of course, far outweigh a ton of candles. But the trouble does not end there. Feeling that she is so economical in tallow candles, she thinks she can afford to go frequently to the village and spend $20 or $30 for ribbons and furloughs, many of which are not necessary. This false economy may frequently be seen in men of business, and in those instances, it often runs to paper writing. You find good businessmen who save all the old envelopes and scraps and would not tear a new sheet of paper if they could avoid it for the world. This is all very well. They may in this way save $5 or $10 a year, but being so economical only in note paper, they think they can afford to waste time, to have expensive parties, and to drive their own carriages. This is an illustration of Dr. Franklin's, quote, saving at the spigot and wasting at the bunghole, or penny wise and pound foolish. Punch, and speaking of this one idea class of people, says they are like the man who bought a penny herring for his family's dinner and then hired a coach and 4 to take it home. I never knew a man who succeeded to succeed by practicing this kind of economy. True economy consists in always making the income exceed the outgo. Wear the old clothes a little longer if necessary. Dispense with the new pair of gloves. Mend the old dress. Live on plainer food if need be. So that under all circumstances, unless some unforeseen accident occurs, there will be a margin in favor of the income. Penny here, a dollar there, placed at interest, goes on accumulating, and in this way, the real desire is attained. It requires some training, perhaps, to accomplish this economy, but once used to it, you will find there is more satisfaction in rational saving than in irrational spending. Here's a recipe which I recommend. I have found it to work an excellent cure for extravagance and especially for mistaken economy. When you find that you have no surplus at the end of the year and yet have a good income, I advise you to take a few sheets of paper and form them into a book and mark down every item of expenditure. Posted every day or week in 2 columns, one headed necessities, the other comforts, and the other headed luxuries. And you will find that the latter column will be double, triple, and frequently 10 times greater than the former. The real comfort of life costs but a small portion of what most of us can earn. Dr. Franklin said, "It is the eyes of others and not our own eyes which ruin us. If all the world were blind except myself, I should not care for fine clothes and furniture." It is the fear of what Mrs. Grundy may say that keeps the noses of most worthy families to the grindstone. In America, many persons like to repeat, "We are all free and equal," but it is a great mistake in more senses than one. That we are born free and equal is a glorious truth in one sense, yet we are not all born equally rich, and we never shall be. So anyhow, the book is The Art of Money Getting, or Golden Rules for Making Money by P.T. Barnum. It's actually a pretty good book.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. Okay, let's see here. There is so much news. There is so much going on. We're going to have a fascinating day today. We're going to hear from the incoming president of the National Organization for Black Law Enforcement, and we're going to hear from Congressman Joe Crowley. I'm looking forward to that. He's the chair of the House Democratic Caucus. But in this first hour, there's just a whole bunch of things. First of all, Scaramucci. Scaramucci. Is he getting too much PR for Trump? I mean, he tweeted this thing about, oh my God, my financial information is out there, and I'm going, and rents, and I'm going to turn this over to the FBI. Well, it turns out that it's publicly available. Anybody can get his financial information. And he's in the process right now of trying to sell his hedge fund to a Chinese bank for $90 million. And if there's this cool little loophole in the law where if you sell your company and then go to work in the White House, you don't pay taxes on the money, essentially. So the mooch is trying really hard to do this deal. And frankly, if I owned a hedge fund right now at this point with the stock market, at this point with the economy, we're getting higher and higher and higher on the, closer and closer and closer to the edge of the ledge. I'd be selling it too. But, the question is, the mooch getting too much publicity for Trump? You've got Republicans in the Senate saying, this administration is out of control. Well, mooch isn't even part of the administration yet. He can't go to work until he sells his company. That's presumably going to be in the middle of August. But, is he getting too much PR for Trump? Trump, took down Spicer basically because he was getting, he was becoming more famous than Trump. Trump doesn't like that. This guy is a little-fingered sociopath who does not, a narcissist who does not like the focus of television attention to be anywhere other than on himself. So number one. Number two, it looks like the Republicans are going to vote on a skinny repeal of Obamacare today. That repeals the individual mandate or repeals the employer mandate. So your employer just might nuke your health insurance if you think that you've got a health insurance through your employer and therefore you're protected if you work for a company that has more than 50 employees. Good luck. It would repeal the medical device tax. In other words, the lobbyists have been whispering in the ears of the Republicans. It would defund Planned Parenthood. leaving millions of American women with, few or untenable options for gynecological and other, and other health issues. It would repeal the Prevention and Public Health Fund, so we're no longer protected against infectious diseases, whether they're just like naturally occurring things, measles epidemics, or whether they're, hey, somebody brought some anthrax into the United States and spread it all over, fill in the blank. And it would repeal the Community Health Center Fund. This is the fund that, I believe, it's the fund that pays for things like the 10,000 community health centers around the United States that Bernie Sanders got put into Obamacare. That's pretty awful stuff. And they're calling it a skinny repeal, like that's desirable. You ever walk into a bar and order a skinny margarita or a skinny gin and tonic? I would think that they would think that you mean less alcohol, right? Like not as much. And who wants that? I suppose, some people are teetotalers or close to it, but with regard to healthcare, who wants skinny healthcare? It's not a good thing. I realize in our culture we're supposed to believe that skinny is good, but this, obviously there are exceptions to that. But anyhow, the top U.S., so there's that. Then yesterday, Trump tweeted out that, he hates transgendered people, basically. And I don't know if he realized or not that somewhere between 10 and 20,000 transgender people are currently serving active duty in the military. But one of them is an acquaintance of mine who's been over 20 years in the Air Force. And this is mind-boggling. So two things to this story, two pieces to this story. The first is Trump announced this with 3 tweets. And the first tweet basically said, I've been talking to my generals and I'm going to do something. And then the second tweet, what he was going to do, took 9 minutes. And apparently, from several news reports from several different sources over at the Pentagon, the big cheeses were totally freaked out because Trump had not discussed this with them in advance. And they didn't know what was coming in that second tweet. The big fear was that he was going to say, in his first tweet, I've talked to my generals. His second tweet was going to be, and we're nuking North Korea in 5 minutes. They had no idea. Now that they know what it is, Joseph Dunford, the general who is the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, sent out a written letter, a written message on Thursday to all military leaders, all branches of the service, saying, and I quote, there will be no modifications to the current, this would be the current policy around transgender people, there will be no modifications to the current policy until the president's direction has been received by the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary has issued implementation guidance. In other words, number one, Trump never told us. Number two, he still hasn't told us the formal way that he's supposed to tell us by notifying us, formally. And number three, we're the ones who decide how and even if this gets put into effect. And then he ends this with a kick in the ass to Trump. He says, in the meantime, we will continue to treat all of our personnel with respect. As importantly, given the current fight and the challenges we face, we will remain focused on accomplishing our assigned missions. There was, in my opinion, in other words, Trump, stop dragging us into your petty and bizarre political fights. Now, meanwhile, the Department of Justice under Jeff Sessions has now come out and said, we're not sure that gay people are protected by civil rights laws. Let that sink in. These guys are committed to rolling us, to taking the United States back to this, make America great again, right? I mean, that was also Ronald Reagan's campaign slogan. Reagan took us halfway back to 1929. Trump is trying to take us the other half of the way. This is nuts. And then Lisa Murkowski was one of the 2 senators, she and Susan Collins, who voted against Trump's throw 32 million people off their health care bill. And so
So, this is a report in the Alaska Dispatch News says that Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, this is a report by Alan Rupar over at thinkprogress.org. According to a report in Alaska Dispatch News, Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, now we were talking about him yesterday, the guy who rode to work on a horse, who's traveling, the Western lands, with his Western outfit and his boots and the whole bit, the cowboy hat. And talking with a drawl and everything, he's suddenly become, a cowboy when his bureaucrats back here in Washington, D.C. are busily working to sell off public lands and give billionaires and oil and mineral developers everything they want and screw the American public. Anyhow, Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke called Murkowski and Dan Sullivan, who is the junior senator from Alaska, and said that Murkowski's vote, quote, this is what Zinke, who's in Trump's cabinet, this is what Zinke said to Dan Sullivan. He said, Murkowski's vote has put Alaska's future with this administration in jeopardy. Really? Sullivan told the Dispatch News that Zinke's Wednesday call was troubling. Sullivan said, I'm not going to go into the details, but I fear that the strong economic growth, pro-energy, pro-mining, pro-jobs, and personnel from Alaska who are part of those policies are going to stop. I tried to push back on behalf of all Alaskans. We're facing some difficult times, and there's a lot of enthusiasm for the policies that Secretary Zinke and the president have been talking about with regard to our economy, but the message was pretty clear. This is government by mafia. This illegitimate president, this national vote loser, is acting like a mob boss. Hey, you wouldn't want anything to happen. Nice state you got there, Lisa. Wouldn't want anything to happen to it. A lot of nice women and children there in Alaska, Lisa. Wouldn't want anybody to get kneecapped. Right. This is, bizarre is not even a strong enough word for this. It's not even close. Meanwhile, Sam Brownback, the guy who screwed up Kansas, totally screwed up Kansas, right, with Reaganomics. He's so unpopular, he couldn't get elected dog catcher in Kansas. So Trump is making him our religious ambassador to the world. What? The United States has a religious ambassador? This is bizarre, too. But anyhow, it's anything goes summer, whatever you'd like to talk about, give us a shout. 202-808-9925. We'll be back with you.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back. Along the lines of other news today, this is interesting. This is from Victoria Jones's daily news summary that she sends out to the press. 7 Senate Republicans joined all Democrats yesterday in rejecting a measure by Senator Rand Paul that would have repealed most of Obamacare. With a 2-year delay, no replacement. Congress passed nearly identical legislation in 2015, sent it to Obama. He vetoed it, but this time they couldn't even pass it. 7 Republicans in the Senate said no. Rand Paul is crazy. Meanwhile, President Trump in the White House itching, I can't say that. Donald Trump in the White House. He's not my president. I'm sorry. He's not my president. He didn't win the majority of votes in this country, just like George W. Bush didn't in 2000. George W. Bush was an illegitimate president. Donald Trump is an illegitimate president. There's no other way to say it. He's there because half of the founders wanted to preserve slavery, so they created the Electoral College. So, anyhow, this is where it gets really bizarre. Scaramucci, he says, if you've read Team of Rivals, it took Lincoln 3 or 4 times to get what he wanted from the Senate and the House of Representatives, which was the full abolition of slavery. That was a much tougher thing to get done than what we're working on right now, but it's too early. Wait a minute. Scaramucci just compared himself and Trump to Abraham Lincoln? there's something very wrong with this. Kurt in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Kurt, what's on your mind today?
Hey, good morning, Tom. You know, I've had a couple weeks here being unemployed, which is okay, because I decided to go back and reread Sinclair Lewis.
Oh, it can't happen here?
Yeah, It Can't Happen Here. Wonderful book. And, you know, I just thought that I'd throw that out there as a suggested reading for your listeners.
Good old Buzz Windrop and what was the other guy's name? The bad guy?
Oh, Wildrip or something like that?
Yeah.
Let's see, I got the book right here.
Buzz Windrop.
Brillious Windrip.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Brazilius.
Yeah. So
it's interesting to read how much this president, right? He beat Franklin Delano Roosevelt for the Democratic in the novel, for the Democratic nomination in '36, and just turned it into a fascist country.
Mm-hmm.
And if we start to read how he did it, I mean, there's just so much that you could see clearly.
Yeah, it's been more than 30 years since I read It Can't Happen Here. How did he start?
I'm sorry, say it again?
I said it's been 30 years since I read the book. I don't remember how he started. What did he?
Well, he started with a really populist appeal, right?
Right.
Because, you know, the country was falling apart. You had millions of people out of work. And so he was saying in the campaign, oh, yeah, I'm supporting you, as long as you do it the way I want you to do it.
Right.
You know, that,
Yep.
just to sum it up. But, yeah, really interesting book, especially when we can see it clearly in our modern time.
Yeah, it truly is, and we are watching it, you know, right in front of us, and it's scary stuff. And Sinclair Lewis wrote that during Roosevelt's first term, didn't he?
Yeah.
Around the time of the of the coup attempt. Very interesting. Kurt, thanks a lot for the call, and thanks for listening to KBCS. We'll be right back. It's coming up on, 20 minutes past the hour, 21 minutes.
Hi there, I'm Marie with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving donations, volunteering, or spreading the word about Free Speech TV, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to exist. And for that, I want to say thank you. Now you can give to the network powered by the people by donating an unwanted or used vehicle through our Vehicles of Change program. If you have an old car, RV, or even a motorcycle, Free Speech TV can use it to grow and thrive. You can make a bigger difference in supporting Free Speech TV by giving an old car. It's a great way to support the network without having to dig into your bank account. Just call 877-378-8669 and ask for more information about Vehicles of Change. Again, the number to call is 877-378-8669. If it has a VIN, we'll take it in. Thank you.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So just, going through some of the stories of the day, it just boggles my mind how much this... This is Mitch Smith and J.C. Fortin in today's New York Times. Sam Brownback, the beleaguered governor of Kansas, whose aggressively conservative fiscal policies turned some fellow Republicans against him. I would say whose aggressively conservative fiscal policies destroyed his state, will be nominated to serve as ambassador at large for international religious freedom. Mr. Brownback, 60, represented his home state in Congress before being elected to 2 terms as governor beginning in 2011. Right. This guy couldn't get elected dog catcher, so they threw him a bone. It's amazing. It's amazing. Okay, apropos of Trump going after trans people yesterday, in order to satisfy a couple of crazy right-wingers in the U.S. House of Representatives, one of them in particular, I retweeted her gibberish yesterday. You can check it out. They were saying, basically, we're not going to give you funding in this House Appropriations bill for your
much beloved Mexican wall unless you cut funding, this $2 to $8 million a year in funding for medical support for trans people in the military. Now, keep in mind, this is the same military that spends $80 million a year on erectile enhancement products like Viagra. $80 million a year, between $2 and $8 million a year for trans people. Just to put this in context, I just want to read a poem. This is an old poem. I'm sure most of you will recognize it. It's over on the website of the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust. It's by Pastor Martin Niemöller. He wrote this just after he was taken off to a concentration camp in the 1930s. First, they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. An attack on trans people is an attack on all of us. We are all human beings here in this country. And for Trump to attack trans people just so he could get funding for his wall in a cynical political ploy is pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. And then you got Trump threatening Murkowski. You got Jeff Sessions saying that gay people are not protected from discrimination under federal law. Now, keep in mind, trans people and gay people, different things. Trans has to do with gender identity. Gay has to do with sexual preference. They're different things, but it's different than the quote norm. So Donald Trump feels free to go after these people. And then, Scaramucci, this is just pathetic. There's an interesting piece over at BuzzFeed News by Adrian Carrasquillo, I'm pronouncing it right, in Washington, D.C. And Adrian, the headline is, Trump actually likes making people's lives living hell, as Sessions is finding out. Trump, famous for firing people on TV, doesn't relish doing so in real life. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have a particular skill set to get them to resign. And Trump, in one of his ghostwritten books, it's called the Trump, The Apprentice. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not The Apprentice. It's whatever it is. Anyhow, in one of his books, he talks about how difficult it is to fire people. He doesn't like firing people. So what he does is he shames them and humiliates them and berates them, and eventually they quit. There's a whole book, literally, not a book, an entire article about this over at BuzzFlash News that is fascinating. Trump, in his book, Way to the Top, was his 2004 book. He says, I don't like firing people. It's not a pleasant thing. Right. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I wonder if when he was a little kid, Trump delighted in pulling the wings off flies, like George W. Bush, did he torture little animals?
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Naomi Klein's brilliant new book, This Changes Everything. This from the introduction. A voice came over the intercom. Would the passengers of Flight 3935, scheduled to depart Washington, D.C. for Charleston, South Carolina, kindly collect their carry-on luggage and get off the plane? They went down the stairs and gathered on the hot tarmac. Then they saw something unusual. The wheels of the U.S. Airways jet had sunk into the black pavement as if it was wet cement. The wheels were lodged so deep, in fact, that the truck that came to tow the plane away couldn't pry out loose. The airline had hoped that without the added weight of the plane's 35 passengers, the aircraft would be light enough to pull. It wasn't. Someone posted a picture. Why is my flight canceled? Because D.C. is so damn hot that our planes sank 4 inches into the pavement. Eventually, a larger, more powerful vehicle was brought in to tow the plane, and this time it worked. The plane finally took off 3 hours behind schedule. The spokesperson for the airline blamed the incident on very unusual temperatures. The temperatures in the summer of 2012 were indeed unusually hot, as they were the year before and the year before, and it's no mystery why this has been happening. The profligate burning of fossil fuels, the very thing that U.S. Airways was bound and determined to do, despite the inconvenience presented by a melting tarmac. This irony, the fact that the burning of fossil fuels is so radically changing our climate that it's getting in the way of our capacity to burn fossil fuels, did not stop the passengers of Flight 3935 from re-embarking and continuing their journeys. Nor was climate change mentioned in any of the major news coverage of the incident. I'm in no position to judge these passengers. All of us who live high consumer lifestyles, wherever we may happen to reside, are metaphorically passengers on Flight 3935. Faced with a crisis that threatens our survival as a species, our entire culture is continuing to do the very thing that caused the crisis, only with an extra dose of elbow grease behind it. Like the airline bringing in a truck with a more powerful engine to tow that plane, the global economy is upping the ante from conventional sources of fossil fuels to even dirtier and more dangerous versions. Bitumen from the Alberta tar sands, oil from deepwater drilling, gas from hydraulic fracking, coal from detonated mountains, and so on. Meanwhile, each supercharged natural disaster produces new irony-laden snapshots of a climate increasingly inhospitable to the very industries most responsible for its warming, like the 2013 historic floods in Calgary that forced the head offices of the oil companies mining the Alberta tar sands to go dark and send their employees home, while a train carrying flammable petroleum products teetered on the edge of a disintegrating rail bridge. Or the drought that hit the Mississippi River 1 year earlier, pushing water levels so low that barges loaded with coal and oil were unable to move for days while they waited for the Army Corps of Engineers to dredge a channel. They had to appropriate funds allocated to rebuild from the previous year's historic flooding along the same waterway. Or the coal-fired power plants in other parts of the country that were temporarily shut down because the waterways that they draw into cooler machinery were either too hot or too dry, or in some cases both. Living with this kind of cognitive dissonance is simply part of being alive in this jarring moment of history, when a crisis that we have been studiously ignoring is hitting us in the face. And yet we're doubling down on the stuff that caused the crisis in the first place. I denied climate change for longer than I care to admit. I knew it was happening, sure, and not like Donald Trump and the Tea Party years going on about how the continued existence of winter proves it's all a hoax. But I stayed pretty hazy on the details and only skimmed most of the news stories, especially the really scary ones. I told myself the science was too complicated and that the environmentalists, they're dealing with it. And I continue to behave as if there was nothing wrong with the shiny card in my wallet attesting to my elite frequent flyer status. A great many of us engage in this kind of climate change denial. We look for a split second and then we look away. Or we look but then turn it into a joke. More signs of the apocalypse, which is another way of looking away. Or we look but tell ourselves comforting stories about how humans are clever and will come up with a technological miracle that will safely suck the carbon out of the skies or magically turn down the heat of the sun, which I was to discover while researching this book is yet another way of looking away. Or we try to look, we look but try to be hyper-rational about it. Dollar for dollar, it's more efficient to focus on economic development than climate change, since wealth is the best protection from climate extremes, weather extremes. As if having a few more dollars will make much difference when your city is underwater, which is a way of looking away if you happen to be a policy wonk. Or we look but tell ourselves we're too busy to care about something so distant and abstract, even though we saw the water in the subways in New York City and the people on the rooftops in New Orleans, and know that no one is safe, the most vulnerable least of all. And though perfectly understandable, this too is a way of looking away. Or we look but tell ourselves that all we can do is focus on ourselves, meditate and shop at farmers markets and stop driving, but forget trying to actually change the systems that are making the crisis inevitable, because that's too much bad energy and it'll never work. And at first it may appear as if we are looking, because many of these lifestyle changes are indeed part of the solution, but we still have one eye tightly shut. Or maybe we look, really look, but then inevitably we seem to forget. Remember and then forget again. Climate change is like that. It's hard to keep in your head for very long. We engage in this odd form of on-again, off-again ecological amnesia for perfectly rational reasons. We deny it because we fear that letting in the full reality of this crisis will change everything. And we are right. And the book is This Changes Everything by Naomi Klein.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And I just want to come back to this for just a minute, and then I'll pick up your phone calls here. But if you go back to 1787, the Constitutional Convention met in Philadelphia and came up with a constitution through August, September, October of 1787, through the summer and early fall. And then began the process of trying to sell this thing, which is what the Federalist Papers were all about over the next year and a half. It wasn't ratified until 2 years later, in 1789, which is when we officially became a country, or a new country, a federal republic. We had been a country operating under the Articles of Confederation before that, but arguably we really weren't a country. There were 13 countries with a trade agreement. That was the Articles of Confederation. So anyhow, James Madison had been shepherding the Constitution through, and he's very proud of it, and justifiably so. I mean, he spent years, 5 years actually, studying constitutions historically, all the way back to ancient Greece, right? Studying constitutions, looking at the Iroquois Confederacy, among other things. So he sends a copy of it to Jefferson. Says, "What do you think?" And Jefferson says, I like this and this and this, but here's what I don't like. And one of the things that Jefferson suggested, and this led to a conversation, you can read their letters online, I'm sure, between Jefferson and Madison, was the danger of religion. Jefferson wanted, not only was there already in the Constitution an explicit ban on religious tests, but he wanted freedom of religion and the press to be attached to the Constitution as a separate Bill of Rights. Madison thought it was unnecessary. In fact, he was worried about a separate Bill of Rights because he thought that might cause people to think these are all the only rights you have. And Jefferson said, no, you've got to say this out loud. No religious test. And then Jefferson goes off on this thing about how the people of America will never be stupid enough to elect somebody who is, a priest, a religious person, a person who puts religion ahead of other things in their lives. And Madison said, well, that doesn't scare me as much as the federal government starting to give money to churches. Should we ever start supporting individual churches in this country, we're going to corrupt the churches with our money. So Jefferson was afraid about religious people having political power. Mike Pence, hint, hint. And Madison was afraid about the federal government giving money to churches, which we do every day. George Herbert Walker Bush started this 1,000 points of light thing, and all this. Let's just pass out money to churches, and we're doing that. And now church schools. Betsy DeVos is expanding that. So this country was literally founded on the idea that we don't do religion in the United States. Religion can be done in the United States, but we the people, we the government, we don't do religion. And now Donald Trump is appointing loser Sam Brownback, the guy who destroyed Kansas with his Reaganomics experiment. He's going to appoint him religious ambassador. Our founders and framers are rolling over in their graves, I'll tell you. And frankly, probably many of the people who fought and died for this nation in the 240 years since then. It's incredible. Robin, listening on Sirius XM in Xenia, Ohio. Hey, Robin, what's on your mind?
Oh, not much. I just wanted to correct you on your use of pronouns back when you said sexual preference. It's actually not a preference, it's an orientation. When you say preference, it implies...
I got it.
When you say preference, it implies that, hey, it's a choice, and it's not a choice.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So I just wanted to correct you on that and tell you what a great job you're doing.
Thank you, Robin. I appreciate that. A lot has changed in my lifetime, and sometimes it takes a while for me to keep up with the language. I appreciate that correction. Thank you, Robin. Dave in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I wanted to get your take on something Scaramucci said about Trump. But, I just want to ask you, because you were really, really good, in my opinion, at connecting the military and corporate interest in foreign affairs. Scaramucci said during, because he was responding to tweets, all right? So it was off topic a little bit, all right? But this is the comment he made. He said at the dinner party that Trump hosted that Trump talked about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and he said the director of the CIA got it, I'm not sure who he was referring to, maybe Tenet. He said the director of the CIA was a good person, but he got it wrong. Now, is that not creepy, the President of the United States, all these years later, still trying to talk about weapons of mass destruction in a virtually obliterated country with really no economic abilities whatsoever?
Yeah, well, you have to keep in mind, Donald Trump's principal news source is Fox so-called news. And Fox, there are personalities on Fox today who are still promoting the idea that there actually were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and they all just got smuggled over to Syria before we showed up. So, that lie is not going to die easily as long as it's attached to George W. Bush's legacy and thus the legacy of the Republican Party. So I'm guessing that Trump, just like, 4 days ago, Fox and Friends, I believe it was Fox and Friends. It was one of the shows. No, it was Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson did a show on how trans people are also child molesters. And, he had a guest on saying this stuff. And, 4 days later, Trump is like bartering away the lives of trans people in exchange for money for his wall in Mexico. This is the most, in my mind, Dave, the most dangerous part of this Trump presidency is the fact that this president gets his information from a news source that we know from university studies when people watch Fox News as their exclusive source of news, they are more malinformed, more misinformed, and more uninformed. They know less about important things, and they know a lot of things that aren't true. They believe them to be true. They believe that they know them than people who watch no news whatsoever. And certainly they're more poorly informed than people who get their news from the corporate media or from NPR or from any other source. Fox is the worst source for information in the United States, demonstrably. And this is where Donald Trump is getting his news. And so, gee, what a surprise he thinks that, Tenet probably just got it wrong. Tenet didn't get it wrong. Dick Cheney walked those lies over to Tenet and other people in the CIA and said, you will say this. And that's pretty much a matter of public record now. So, Dave, interesting question. Thank you very much. Linwood, somehow my Linwood call back. I'm sorry. My call screening software here just jumped right over you. Brian in Indianapolis. Hey, Brian, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Brian. Hi, Tom. This is Brian from Indianapolis. Long-time listener. I started listening to you when I lived in Maryland many years ago. Proud Hoosier progressive. And I really think a lot of times here in the Midwest, a lot of us progressives were forgotten about. There are a lot of progressives in the Midwest.
Absolutely. I grew up in Michigan, and I still,
Mike Pence land. And there are very few people that know about this man and how dangerous he is more than Hoosier progressives like me. We all know he pushed the so-called Religious Freedom Act here in Indiana, which basically destroyed our state's tourism economy, gave Indiana a very bad image of being an intolerant state. And quite frankly, he decided to run with Trump because he was going to lose here in Indiana.
Oh, yeah, he was down like 30% popularity. I mean, it was
absolutely
totally in the crapper.
Totally. But the reason why I'm calling today, Tom, is that I really want Democrats to really start running more aggressive, muscular campaigns. It just seems like, and I'm a young guy, I'm not even in my 50s, but it seems like Democrats in the past were a lot tougher. It was just whether it was Truman or the Kennedys or Johnson, they just ran more muscular campaigns against Republicans. And they put Republicans on their heels. They played hardball. It just seems like Democrats, we just don't run tough campaigns against these Republicans anymore. And I think the way for us to do that is, and I agree with you about single payer, I think we need to run a very patriotic campaign where we say, hey, we're going to take our country back from the Russian influence that our current occupant of the White House is truly under. There's no doubt about it. He's truly under the influence of the Russians. I think if we ran a campaign like that, along with pushing economic populism like single payer, I like our chances in 2018 and definitely taking the White House back in 2020. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, step by step. I mean, if you can demonstrate any specific policies that Trump is promoting as a result of Russian influence, go after them. I don't know of any. Do you?
Well, I mean, look at the fact that he's. Well, let's see what happens with the bill that's been passed by Congress.
The sanctions. But that's not him screwing us on behalf of another country. I'm not saying I'm not saying this is not a thing, and I'm not saying that it's not something we should be very concerned about. We should be very upset about. And there needs to be, and I've been saying this from day one, that there needs to be an independent and nonpartisan commission that looks into what's going on, that looks into Russian interference in our election, that looks into Russian oligarch or government involvement with Donald Trump, all of that. But to the point of Democrats winning elections again, the difference between Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, John Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, the muscular Democrats that you're talking about, and the Democratic Party of today, in my opinion, has nothing to do with Russia. It has to do with the fact that back then, Democrats were united around a set of core values that had to do with the labor movement, that had to do with building a middle class, that had to do with pushing back against oligarchy. You know, FDR famously saying, they hate me, and I welcome their hatred, calling them out by name. Harry Truman used to do that. Lyndon Johnson used to do that. Going after these guys. I mean, the way that LBJ went after Barry Goldwater ended up winning, what, 2 states? Something like that. They were able to do that. And then, you know, the corporate influence came into the Democratic Party in a really big way in the late 80s and early 90s. And it diluted the ability of the Democratic Party to say, we're here to fight against the corporations and the billionaires on your behalf, because they were then taking money from the corporations and the billionaires. And that's the existential crisis that the Democratic Party faces right now, is in a post-Citizens United world, in this day and age, in this, you know, post-Buckley versus Vallejo, 1976, Citizens United 2010, in this world where basically money reigns, you know, money rules, that particularly if you're from a large state, there's no way you can win an election without a lot of cash. In that world, how does the Democratic Party survive without the labor unions? You know, back when Reagan came into office and a third of America was members of a union, the unions had incredible power. They were the major supporters of the Democratic Party and the major funders of the Democratic Party. And that's why Republicans have tried to destroy the post office. It's the largest unionized employer in the United States. It's why they started, the very first thing Ronald Reagan did was his war on labor unions. He went after the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Association. He went after PATCO. And he's been successful. We're now down to 6% in the private sector of employment, you know, of unionization, from 30% or more back in 1980. So that money source for Democrats has been wiped out. And the unions that are left are, you know, frantically just trying to hold on, you know, trying to stay above water. That's been wiped out. So this is the crisis the Democrats are facing. I don't have an easy answer for them. And, you know, other than really going after money in politics.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Brian, thanks for the call. We'll be back. Welcome back. Tom, watching Free Speech TV in Somerville, Mass. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today? Tom? Okay, Tom, I'm going to put you on hold, and Tom is on line 7, Nate, if you want to catch him and find out what's going on. Michael in Imperial Beach, California. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Mr. Hartmann. Okay, on the road, so this is not a written question, but about this new dude, Anthony Scaramucci,
right,
who was a hedge fund hedge funds person, made his money through Wall Street. Now he's in control. I mean, Sean Spicer, he gone. We got Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and we got him. How do you explain how and again, prior to this, 2 or 3, 4 years ago, he ranked out Donald Trump and dissed him a big one. And now he's his best buddy. I don't understand these people.
Yeah, well, I think that there's everybody, all the billionaires in New York, maybe not all of them, but the circles that Donald Trump and Scaramucci's not a billionaire. He's only worth, what, $80 million, something like that. But what these rich people understand is that it can be expensive to have values. Instead, what you have are allegiances and alliances. It's not what you know, it's who you know. It's not what you believe, it's who you know who can make something happen. And their principal allegiance is to power and wealth. Or maybe I should reverse that, to wealth and the power that it can buy. And so as a consequence of that, Scaramucci, took the skin off Donald Trump a couple of years ago on CNBC. But that said, he can go back to Trump and say, hey, that was just me then. I was just trying to make some money. I was just trying to be liked, just like you. I mean, Donald Trump, you used to support abortion. You say, you even asked Marla Maples if she wanted to have an abortion. You used to support gay rights. You used to talk about climate change. And now you don't. So you've changed. I could change too. It doesn't matter. Beliefs are not important. What's important is supporting each other, is being together, is fighting the fight. I can just imagine that conversation between Mooch and Trump, and Trump going, yeah, absolutely, yep, just like that Sessions. He's like loyal to this idea of the institution of the FBI and the Justice Department, and he really should be loyal to me. What's this loyal to the American people stuff? And Lisa Murkowski, she's worried about people in Alaska not having health care. Screw her. I want a victory. This is about me. This is the kind of stuff that Trump says, and this is the kind of thinking that you see on display in the White House. And it's clear, it's clear to me that Mooch is as much of a narcissistic sociopath as Trump is. Maybe not quite as much, but close. And so it's a band of brothers rather than a team of rivals. What do you think,
Okay,
Mike?
can I ask you one last question?
Real quick.
Very quick, right. I asked this to Stephanie Miller. Now, about Jefferson Beauregard Sessions.
The third.
If he's the supreme leader of lawyers in the United States, who hires a lawyer who cannot even remember stuff?
Well, I don't remember is the strongest defense against a perjury prosecution that there is. And in my opinion, that's why it's why Reagan said it over 160 times when he was deposed in Iran-Contra. And it's why, Jeff Sessions kept saying, I don't remember when he was testifying before Congress, in my opinion. So, yeah. And every lawyer in the country knows that. Michael, thank you for the call. Welcome back. Tom in Somerville, Mass. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today? Tom, this is not working. You got to listen to your telephone, not your radio. Vinish in Canoga Park, California. Hey, Vinish, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's on your mind?
Hey, thanks, Tom. So, a huge fan of your commentary on the social progressive issues and fight against the blatant corruption of the capitalism. So, my point is. So one of the callers just called and wanted to talk about the muscularness of the Democratic. I want to argue that point a little bit. In what I think, Tom, that right now the Democratic Party is going through a transition. So these are changing times. We have given chance to a black man to become a president. We have given a chance to a woman to become a president. It can happen in 2020. We can give a chance to a gay man to become a president, right? And so not only a white man can come in and have a muscular campaign to do it, and we are fighting the misogyny, we are fighting the racism that only a certain section of the people can become the president and can become the top leader. So I think what we are doing, what the Democratic Party is doing, they have to continue doing that. They have to continue pushing the pamphlet. They have to show a mirror to the society that anybody, if you are capable, you can come in and become a president. You are capable, you can come and join the army, you can serve the army, and we have to continue doing that. taking the so-called masculine factor out of the campaign.
Sure.
That's what I believe.
Vinish, I think that's a very, very good point. And, we need to acknowledge all the successes that the Democratic Party has had, over the last couple of decades. And we also need to acknowledge that there's a bunch of right-wing petro-billionaires who have funded an organization that's larger and more well-financed and well-staffed than the Republican Party itself. And that those organizations that the Koch network has funded have largely taken over, control of every single elected Republican in the United States, or the vast majority of them. So, it's not just the failures of the Democrats; it is the successes of the autocrats, or of the plutocrats, rather, the billionaires, in not only seizing the Republican Party, but seizing much of the media that informs America. Excellent point, Vinish. Thank you for the call. Jeanette in Richland Center, Wisconsin. Hey, Jeanette, what's up?
I've got a couple things to talk about. One of them is the Boy Scouts in West Virginia. I have a grandson who comes out of Kansas. My daughter is a education person in Kansas, so I know all about Tom Beck and what he's done there. Well, this very knowledgeable grandson of mine, who's an Eagle Scout, he has written papers on the plight of Syria. He went to this rally in West Virginia and listened to this Trump speech, which was probably the most offensive thing that...
You're talking about the Boy Scout Jamboree?
Yes.
Okay.
And I heard on Stephanie Miller, another woman call in and said her son came from California to that. And here Obama was booed, Clinton was booed, and Trump was rallying up that bunch with all the negatives that he can do.
Right.
And I'm very angry over that. I'd also like to tell you about Tillerson.
Well, hang on just a second, Jeanette. Let's just talk about that for a second first. I would say that it shouldn't surprise us that the Boy Scouts are leaning right-wing. It's a paramilitary organization. It wears uniforms. It salutes. It's got ranks. Those are the kinds of institutions that if somebody's not drawn to authoritarianism and thus joins, if they join, no matter who they are, they learn lessons about authoritarianism. So
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you, but the place they put my grandson is not up to me to decide, but it still should not have had a speech like that.
Oh, I totally agree. I totally agree. I'm just not surprised. I'm not astonished by it, frankly. So we've got a minute left. What you wanted to make another point about boycotts, was it?
Yes. Tillerson should never have been on Trump's elbow at that meeting for Putin. The Exxon organization has a $300 billion contract held on sanctions.
Yep.
And Tillerson, even though he's out of there, he'll always be an oil man. And what Exxon has done in Chad or Nigeria, the poor people of the nations where the oil industry goes in have even less of a life because the dictators are propped up and they gain no money from it.
Yeah, totally agree. Tillerson should have recused himself.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, just like Sessions had to recuse himself just because he had a meeting. Tillerson has had a 40-year relationship, and one that has been incredibly profitable and made millions of dollars for him and billions of dollars for his company. And he absolutely should recuse himself with regard to anything having to do with, frankly, not just Russia, but the oil industry as a whole, or at least for the first year or so. And it would be interesting to know how many stock options Tillerson is still holding on to in ExxonMobil and how that might be influencing his decisions. And maybe he sold them all. I mean, it's entirely possible that Tillerson, he's a Boy Scout, he's an Eagle Scout, maybe he is an ethical guy. Maybe not. But, the appearance of impropriety is what a person has to avoid, as well as actual impropriety. Jeanette, thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com. Hi, it's the Thom Hartmann Book Club with the Thom Hartmann University, and today we're reading from Threshold, the Progressive Plan to Pull America Back from the Brink. I'm reading from the preface. This is page XIII. The world right now is tottering atop three major thresholds. An environment that is so afire that it may soon no longer be able to support human life. An economic free market system that is almost entirely owned, run, and milked by a tiny fraction of 1% of us and has crashed and in many ways is burning around us. And an explosion of human flesh on the planet that has turned our species into a global petri dish just waiting for an effective agent to run amok. 4 mistakes have brought us to this point, and the failure to recognize them at their deepest level will only push us faster toward total tipping points where we are thrown over the 3 thresholds and into disaster. All 4 of these mistakes are grounded in our culture, our way of thinking, our way of seeing the world, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and why we're here. The first mistake is a belief that we're separate from nature. Our religions tell us that we were created by a supernatural being who is not part of this earth and not from this planet. He set us apart from all other life, and many among us, perhaps even the majority of the 6 billion of us, roughly 7 billion now, don't even believe that we are animals, but instead think we're a totally unique life form. The second mistake is a belief that an abstraction, an economic system, is divine and separate from us. This mythical so-called free market, so we believe, operates under its own divine rules and is entirely and eternally self-regulating. It is always right. The fact that worldwide it's more than 95% owned and run by fewer than 0.00001% of us is just the way things are, always were, and always will be. We are here to serve the economy, this belief goes. It's not here to serve us. The third mistake is a belief that men should run the world and that women are their property. While it may seem that women's rights are well advanced and society is nearly egalitarian in the developed world, the United States, Western Europe, and Australia combined are only about a quarter of the population of the world. In India, it's still a common rural practice for men to burn their wives to death simply because it's more convenient than divorce. In many Arab countries and across much of Africa and South America, it's not uncommon for women to be murdered by their families if they dishonor the family by not going along with an arranged marriage or not being a virgin at time of marriage. Even in the first world, women are routinely excluded from positions of power in the world's largest institutions, such as the Catholic Church. This is one of our biggest mistakes, not just because it's morally deficient or because it can be biologically challenged, but because its primary result is an explosion in population. The fourth mistake is a belief that the best way to influence people is through fear rather than through the power of love, compassion, or support. We stand baffled when Palestinians in Gaza vote for a political party that has a long history of terrorist activity, somehow completely overlooking the fact that that same group has been feeding people, building schools and hospitals, and providing old age and widow pensions to people in need. We think we can threaten and bomb people into liking us and behaving in ways consistent with our best interests while ignoring their own best interests. We have come to believe that we are not our brother's keeper, that we are separate from all other humanity on the planet, and in all that, we are mistaken. Civilizations have come and gone, and those long gone vanished mostly because they despoiled their commons, allowed small elites to control their economies and governments, and lived in ways that were unsustainable. Those who survived for centuries or millennia are the ones that learned how to protect their commons engage in non-toxic commerce and governance, and organize their cultures and lifestyles in ways that could continue in the same place and the same way down through the ages. If we don't learn the lessons of the latter, we shall face the fate of the former. And just a little bit from the first chapter. This is titled Darfur, and on the border with Darfur, Sudan, March 16th, 2008. It's late morning, and I'm sitting on the dirt ground typing it into an old AA battery-operated pocket word processor, a Zorus ZR5000, in part because the nearest electricity is over 500 miles away. So is the nearest paved road and the nearest building made with anything other than mud or grass. This is Gok Machar, southern Sudan, just a few miles from the border with Darfur, a village that's swelled from 8,000 people to more than 45,000 as refugees flee the bombings and murders take place as I type these words just 50 miles to the northwest. About 300 people arrived just this morning, most with nothing more than the clothes they were wearing, many with stories of relatives who died along the way as they fled or before the UN could transport them here. When we first arrived on the African continent, we looked out onto the nighttime savannah beyond our Nairobi hotel, and it was truly a startling sight, one I'd almost forgotten since my last visit to Kenya back in 1982. The landscape is huge, horizon to horizon, like the movies you see of these parts of Africa. The land here in South Sudan is just as vast and flat. The 45,000 people around me share one single hand-pumped well, drilled a decade ago by the UN, and no other infrastructure beyond that. No buildings, no roads, no septic tank or sewer system, no schools, no clinics, no hospitals, no stores, or even storehouses. Nothing. The book is Threshold, the progressive plan to pull America back from the brink.
I'm Nina Turner, and you're watching Free Speech TV.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program, broadcasting on commercial radio stations from coast to coast on Sirius XM all across the North American continent, on Pacifica stations across America, Europe, and Africa, on American Forces Radio on every U.S. military base in the world, on your electronic device via TuneIn, Progressive Voices, Thom Hartmann app, and simulcast as television by Free Speech TV on Dish Network, DirecTV, and cable systems nationwide. So happy to have you with us. And on the line with us, Congressman Joe Crowley, brilliantly representing the 14th District of New York, and chair, most importantly, of the House Democratic Caucus, although I'm guessing your constituents in New York would say secondarily importantly. Congressman Crowley, welcome back to the program. It's been a while.
Thanks, Tom. It's great to be back with you. It has been a while, but always glad to be back with you.
Yeah, back at you. By the way, for people who want to learn more about you and the work you're doing, Crowley, crowley.house.gov is your website, and you can tweet Congressman Crowley at Rep. Joe Crowley or at House Democrats. And,
that's a PSA.
Say that again?
That's a PSA.
PSA, okay. There you go. And any of our, if you've, I understand, Congressman, you can stay with us for the half hour.
Yeah, I think they told me 20 minutes, but a half hour is fine by me as long as they don't call votes on me.
Okay. Well, we can. Yeah, that's
sure.
Great.
You need, yeah.
We will insert a small break in there, but it'll be 20 minutes from now, 25 minutes.
Great.
When we hit the break at the bottom of the hour, the hard break at the bottom of the hour. There is a soft break in the middle. But if anybody has a specific question for the guy who is the chair of the House Democratic Caucus, we can put you on.
Yep.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
First of all, feel free to pontificate on whatever's at the top of your mind right now if there's something that you think is really important that our listeners need to know about. But also, I'm curious what you see as the direction of the Democratic Party. We had some callers in the last hour talking about, how should the Democratic Party position itself and how should it take on Trump? And I'm just wondering what the contemporary thinking is on all this.
Well, I think the contemporary thinking is that we just can't be the party against Trump. That's clear. Although he's doing a pretty good job himself of mucking things up, as we say. I think we have to stand for something, and I think Democrats always have, quite frankly. I think we didn't do a good enough job of communicating who we are, what we stand for in the last election for a myriad of reasons. And I think Trump was able to to capitalize that in his marketing way as a TV personality, and kind of connect in some way. The reality is that his connecting during the election has no relevance to how he's governing, and he's not delivering at all for the people that he said he was fighting for. It's interesting to see what happened yesterday in terms of the ban on transgender. When he had said during the campaign and the tweets that had gone out that, I'll stand for the LGBT community, forgetting that T stands for transgender, obviously, and, to take the hateful steps he took yesterday to ban these individuals from serving in our nation's military is just another indication of he says one thing to get elected and then does something completely different once elected. Now, some folks would say that's the way politicians act, but there are just certain things you just don't do, and these are people's real lives that we're talking about. So that's an example of it. But I do think that Democrats have stood for the working man, for unions, for those who are struggling to make ends meet, and for all of us to succeed and do better in America, and not just the wealthiest, 1%.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I'm really looking forward as time goes on, as this whole better deal gets rolled out, to seeing the details of it.
Yep.
Kayam has a question for you. He's calling, or she, I'm not sure, calling from Seattle, Washington. Kayam, you're on the air with Congressman Joe Crowley.
Hi.
Hi. Gee.
My name is Kayam, and I'm only 10. And I'm one of the most political 10-year-olds that my people say they've ever met. And I think that transgender people are the only difference they have from other people is the difference that people have from each other. You either think of yourself as a man or you think of yourself as a woman, and the way that you think about yourself is the way that you are. So I'm just wondering, what are you going to do to stop this horrible thing? I don't know what to call it, from continuing, because transgender people, like I said, they're people.
Yeah. Well,
thank you.
What district do you live in? Who's your congressperson?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure?
My senator is Reuben Carlisle.
Wow. Well, I had to tell you something. You're 15 years away from being eligible to run for Congress, but someday I hope you run for Congress, because we need young people like you with that kind of acumen and caring about their fellow man, and that includes man and woman, and that includes transgender, and that's why I think, from the mouths of babes, as the adage goes, babe, when it comes to your political acumen, and I couldn't agree more with you, and I think you hit the nail on the head. This is about human beings. This is about individuals who have taken an oath to protect their country from all enemies, foreign and domestic, that they will obey the military code of honor, that they will take that hill if commanded to do so by their superior officer. It's the test that needs to be met as to whether or not you have the ability to serve in our military, whether you have the physical and mental capability of doing that. And those are rigorous standards that are set up by the military to do that, and they ought to be. But regardless of whether you're straight or gay or you're a transgender person, you ought to be able to contribute to the protection of this great nation. And what the president did yesterday, in my opinion, is unforgivable. It's hateful. It was done to distract from, I think, the tension that is taking place in the White House today on multiple levels. It was to distract from the Russia investigation. It was to distract from their inability to get anything accomplished here in Washington, D.C. So, we need more people like you thinking that way, and I think you're a great, great indicator of the youth of America. They see right through this president, this individual. They know what he's made of, and 9 times out of 10, they reject him. So I appreciate that call. It was wonderful.
And if Trump did this to get, and there are some news reports that he did this just to get some votes out of the House for his for funding for his wall in Mexico, that makes it even doubly heinous.
Cynical and heinous, and even more unforgivable.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan in Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming, listening on Sirius XM. You are on the air with Congressman Joe Crowley, the chairman of the House Democratic Caucus.
Hello, Congressman. Hey, Tom. Good to talk to you guys. Wondering what the Democratic Party is thinking about as far as getting rid of the Electoral College and political district gerrymandering, considering how the vote went last time. It was so close, and just a change of about 10,000 votes. Wisconsin, Michigan would have taken it the other way.
Pennsylvania, Florida too.
And yeah, but I'll take my answer off the air. Just want to hear what your opinion is on those two issues. Thanks.
I appreciate that. And interestingly enough, my wife Casey, her family comes from Montana, right next door. They originally homesteaded in Wyoming back in the late 1800s. So I've been out there, a great part of the country, and really a boy from Queens makes his way out to the West, and I love it.
That's great.
And what I would say is that I do think that there are more and more people looking at whether or not the structure of the Electoral College is arcane or not, whether or not it's truly representative of representative democracy. I think live by the sword, die by the sword to some degree as well, although it looks like Democrats have been dying by the sword more often than not when it comes to this. We look at the election of 2000. Certainly we look at the election of 2016 and the pain that was caused by that. This really is has been generally an issue of states' rights and their the relegation in terms of gerrymandering or redistricting. The likelihood that will change is pretty nil, but I do think that there may be a more uniform way in which it could be we could cajole those states to conform to one that is more representative of interests of that district that go beyond politics, that really reflect the cities or the towns and that populace. I think what has happened, especially prior to the last reapportionment, is that my Republican colleagues in their party invested a tremendous amount of money in winning local state legislative seats, and that had an impact on reapportionment and gerrymandering, quite frankly, as Dan put it, that put us at a disadvantage. We do see the Supreme Court has taken some positive steps, certainly in Carolina and in Texas and Florida, and that is having an impact in terms of our ability to win some of those seats that were gerrymandered against us. So I think the book is still out on that, and it's something we need to continue to work on.
Good thing. Congressman Crowley, hang on just a second. We've got to take a real quick break here. We're talking with Congressman Joe Crowley of New York.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
He is the chairman of the House Democratic Caucus. You can tweet him at Rep. Joe Crowley, Crowley. His website, crowley.house.gov. So, Congressman Crowley, you're still with us?
Yes, I am.
Great. Our commercial stations are in break right now in Sirius XM, but our non-commercial stations and Free Speech TV are still live with us.
Great.
So we have about half our audience right now. When we come back in 4 minutes from the commercial break,
sure,
I'll recap whatever you had to say to the folks listening on our commercial stations. But right now, John in Minneapolis, Minnesota is watching us on Free Speech TV, and he has a question for you. John, you're on the air with Congressman Crowley.
Yeah, I'll try to make this really brief. There's already forces within the Democratic Party and, the center Democratic Party, or, what the Democratic Party was, critiquing our revolution. Now, I didn't pick the terminology. I'm a little uncomfortable with calling it our revolution, but that's what they chose. But really, it's an our revolution. It's a revolution to get back to the roots of the Democratic Party, the New Deal, and all of the things that went along with it. We've just moved so far to the right, and so I just find this really, kind of unfortunate, and I'd like to know what the Democratic Party is going to do to recapture what they were, because there's still a lot of people in the Democratic Party that absolutely hated Bernie Sanders, and I worked in the Bernie Sanders campaign here, and I can tell you when I went through the door, and I'm very perceptive of that, they did not want us there, not one bit, and we've made a lot of progress, but already we're getting a backlash in the form of opinion pieces in the Star Tribune, which is probably, as most newspapers are, very conservative anyway. So I just wanted to know what we're going to do with that, because, you know, the Democratic Party here in this state has traded its reputation on some of the most liberal persons in Congress, Wellstone, Eugene McCarthy, you know, amongst others, Walter Mondale, although he is a little bit more, you know, middle of the road, you know, and Hubert Humphrey. I mean, you know.
John, we've got about a minute and a half left before we hit our break, so let's let Congressman Crowley answer your question, okay?
Well, I thank John for the question, and I've served for many years with Bernie Sanders in the House of Representatives, had a great relationship and friendship with him, and that continues today. You know, to say that I don't think Democrats hate Bernie Sanders. I think that we looked at what Bernie did, and I think in many respects helped to focus on the issues that we care about as a country. And, you know, some of that was accepted, and some of it may have been somewhat rejected in terms of the electorate. But we look at his contribution in terms of the election and say, overall, very positive involvement. But, you know, the state of Minnesota has been a bastion of progressivity for the United States. I think, you know, John is right. And I think that still exists today. I think you have, you know, Tim Walz, and I think you have Rick Nolan, two folks that come to mind, who are very progressive people who are really outspoken in our Democratic caucus as well, and talk about the values of working men and women. I know that Rick runs on the Democratic and Labor party line in that state. So, you know, I think we've always held these positions. We may not have articulated them as well as we ought to have, and I think that's what happens sometimes in these elections, that people say we go too right, we go too left. I think in the end, what Democrats have to do is that we have the message capability, we have to deliver the message, and that's what we're going to be about in the 2018 and 2020 cycles.
Great news. We will rejoin our commercial stations in just a second. Congressman Joe Crowley with us, taking your calls for the half hour. The chair of the House Democratic Caucus, crowley.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep, R-E-P, Joe, J-O-E, Crowley, C-R-O-W-L-E-Y.
Hi, I'm Heather with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving of donations, volunteering, or even spreading the word, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to sustain for more than 20 years. Now, you can give to Free Speech TV through the Branch of Gratitude. This program is a sustainable way to give that reduces waste through paper mailing, postage, and staff hours. By choosing to participate in the Branch of Gratitude, you are joining hands with the socially conscious community and sending a message to the world that Free Speech TV is not only here to stay, it is here to thrive. Please call 877-378-8669 or go online to freespeech.org. Make a difference and join the Branch of Gratitude today.
Welcome back. Congressman Joe Crowley taking your calls. Lori in Temple, Texas. Hey, Lori, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. You're on the air with Congressman Crowley.
Thank you for taking my phone call. My concern is about the future of the Democratic Party and your specific goals to reach the middle class. I grew up in a rural county. The driving force in that county was Alcoa. Alcoa has now left the county. Mm-hmm. And so our major employers now is the agriculture and the county government and medical.
Right, right.
So we have no economic base to sustain our schools, to pay for all the other infrastructure we need in that county. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do for the rural counties in America that need a good company to come in to do sustainable employment for these people?
Well, thank you, Laurie. Thank you for the question. And, Laurie, before I answer that, Tom, let me also mention, I failed to mention Betty McCollum from Minnesota, as well as obviously Keith Ellison, who's, the chair of the party today. So
and a regular on this show.
Minnesota. I don't want them to think that I neglected them. But Laurie asked a great question. And I think, Laurie and Tom and listeners, I think what Democrats failed to do in the last election was to speak to the pursuit of happiness. And something I feel very, very strongly about, and I've used the example of a motor company, a motor plant, auto plant up in Michigan that moved 10 hours away to Tennessee. That when that person who has to make a decision as to whether they stay in their community or move to that other state to get that job, are probably paying less wages for it. Maybe not a union job anymore. That it has incredible impact on that family, the stress that it creates. I use the example of separating grandparents from grandchildren, for instance, and that's something we stopped talking about, the impact that has on the family structure itself. That family had been in that community, maybe Laurie in your community has been there for generations, and now has to decide whether they can still continue to live there, whether they have the schools that can educate their children properly for the new economy. And so that's what Democrats need to continue to talk about. Understand first, we have to have solutions, but understand the problems that people are facing and the stress. And you've expressed that as well. What I would like to see in this, the better deal, better jobs, better wages, better future that we're talking about as Democrats, is the idea of a big infrastructure bill. I'm talking about, a Marshall Plan for the United States that will create millions of new jobs that are high-paying jobs. These are jobs, and I hope most of them are going to be union jobs, that are going to be building our infrastructure, reinvesting in America, that can be bridge jobs, not only building bridges, but building bridges to the future economy, ensuring that people can have a sustainable job that's a quality job that can uplift communities and towns like yours, Laurie, can invest in making sure the schools are teaching their children, our children, for the new economy that we're going to be facing. And I think that's what's critical, certainly about what I think we need to do in terms of making the investment in America that we need to do to keep us number one, but to also to provide those opportunities as generations did. I think, Tom, you've made reference to the fact that the New Deal, the Better Deal type of thing, that correlation, or maybe John did in the previous call. And there's no doubt that we're kind of making that link. But think of the investments that were made during the Depression that Roosevelt did that really helped give quality to people's lives and got us back on our feet. I think that's what Democrats are talking about today, and that's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, and apropos of that infrastructure, I mean, when Eisenhower was building infrastructure, every community that had a highway off-ramp suddenly prospered.
Yep.
What if the new superhighway system is the Internet? What about high-speed broadband as part of that infrastructure?
Absolutely. Equal access to broadband is what I'm talking about. I think Democrats are talking about as well. Building out that system to go that extra mile when it's not profitable, we have to make it profitable. We have to make it mandatory that build-out takes place, so that every child, every family, and every child has access to broadband and to Internet access, because that's the teaching tool of the future.
Amen.
It's the teaching tool of now, quite frankly.
Amen. Congressman Joe Crowley, it's great talking with you. There's people in South Carolina, Washington, Michigan, Vermont, Illinois, Washington, and California who are on hold, hoping they can talk to you. So come back again, please.
I'd love to, Tom. I'll be back again, my friend.
Congressman Crowley, thank you so much.
All the best.
We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And once again, Congressman Joe Crowley's website, crowley.house.gov, and you can tweet him at Rep. Joe Crowley. We'll be back. Thank you. Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Our book today is Walking Your Blues Away, How to Heal the Mind and Create Emotional Well-Being. And we're reading starting on page 2 in the introduction. The human body is a self-healing organism.
When you cut your finger, it heals. If you break your leg, it heals. Even if part of you is cut out in surgery, the surgeon's wound heals. We heal from bacterial and viral invasions, from injuries, from all variety of traumas. The mechanisms of healing are built into us. 5 million years of evolution or the grace of God or both have made our bodies automatic healing machines. So why wouldn't the same be true of our minds and our emotions? All of the traumas that we experience in life leave their wounds. If humankind hadn't had ways of healing from those emotional and psychological blows, over time society would have become progressively less functional. Instead, history shows us that people usually recover from even the most severe psychological wounds, often learning great lessons or gaining important insights in the recovery process. The famous Kauai, Hawaii longitudinal study of children raised in stressful, disadvantaged conditions, they were migrant farm workers, found that a higher percentage of the children grew up to be highly resilient than did a middle-class control group. The generation that survived the Great Depression and the Nazi Holocaust in Europe went on to create important social institutions, build nations, and offer comfort and hope to humankind. Elie Wiesel's experience specifically comes to mind, although he never would have wished on another the horrific experience of being in one of Hitler's death camps. Through his writing of that experience, he has given a particularly inspiring model of resilience and healing to the world. The reality is that although adversity breaks some people, it strengthens others. And when people heal from adversity, the old cliche of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger usually rings true. But just as with the production of scar tissue in the healing of a wound to the skin, a process involving millions of cells producing very specific compounds in response to the trauma in the tissue, there must be an inborn mechanism for healing the mind and the emotions. And just as healing from a cut can be speeded up by keeping the wound dry, or can be slowed down by letting the wound get wet or dirty and irritated, this emotional healing is also a process that can be either stimulated or thwarted by our interventions. In this book, I've identified a specific healing mechanism and process that nature has built into the human mind and body that enables us to process trauma in a way that is quick, functional, and permanent. Just like the skin's mechanism for forming scabs and scars and eventually even making the scars vanish, this mechanism is simple, fundamental, and elegant. In its simplest form, this mechanism involves rhythmic side-to-side stimulation of the body. This side-to-side motion, or bilateral motion, causes nerve impulses to cross the brain from the left hemisphere to the right hemisphere and back at a specific rate or frequency. This cross-patterning produces an organic integration of left hemispheric thinking functions with right hemisphere and brainstem feeling functions. This integration is a necessary precursor to emotional and intellectual healing from trauma. This steady movement of nerve impulses across the hemispheres of the brain is stimulated by the bilateral movement processes of a variety of modern forms of psychotherapy, such as eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, also known as EMDR, emotional freedom technique, and thought field therapy. In its purest form, however, I've discovered that the natural and rhythmic left-right process of walking while performing a simple mental exercise can also stimulate the same internal integration process. This, I posit, is the way humans have healed themselves for trauma for the hundreds of thousands of years of human history. And it's only because so few of us walk anymore that we have to resort to office-based psychotherapeutic processes to produce a similar result. And that result is impressive. When we stimulate the nervous system in this bilateral manner while calling to mind a persistent emotional distress, the emotional charge associated with that memory quickly and permanently dissipates. This isn't a process of producing amnesia or forgetting. Instead, it's a way of reframing the past, a way of re-understanding or putting into context what has been so unnerving to us. When we perform this bilateral process correctly, the pictures of painful past events in our memory transforms from stark, scary, sound-filled color movies into black and white still pictures that are flattened out and lose their sound. The internal dialogue we have about the events, the tagline that we tell ourselves, and actually hear in our own heads and in our own voices, changes, usually from something like, that was a painful experience that still scares me, or I was victimized in that relationship, to a more productive synopsis, such as, yes, that happened to me, but it's well in the past now, and I've learned some good lessons from the experience. I can now let go of it. Inciting the movement of nerve impulses across the brain's hemispheres helps people come to terms with their past. They stop being frightened by their imagined futures and feel comfortable and empowered in the present. Walking while holding a traumatic memory in mind in a particular way can produce this result in a very short time. And the book goes on to talk about how exactly to use simple walking, just going out for a 20-minute walk, which is physically good for you. Use that simple walking and combine it with a very specific set of mental exercises that Sigmund Freud and Franz Anton Mesmer and others first discovered years ago. Walking your blues away.
Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
Support the Thom Hartmann Program and see video of our entire 3-hour show over at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Linwood in Gordonsville, Virginia. Hey, Linwood, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. It's been a long time since I listened to your show. I just have a question and I have a rant.
Okay.
My question is, if the Republicans, which pretty much they've been spending 7 years of saying, we're going to repeal and replace the law, we're going to repeal and replace the law, we're going to repeal and replace the law. Okay, if they say they're going to repeal and replace, why are they going through this theatrics now? Just repeal it and get it over with. You got 50-something votes. Get rid of it already.
Well, they had that before them yesterday for a vote with a 2-year delay, so that it would be after the election before people really experienced the pain as a consequence of this, and they could only get 43 votes for it. They couldn't hit 51 votes.
So here's my question, because I've been hearing about budget reconciliation. I've been hearing about 60 votes. What does the 60 votes really mean? Because I personally am upset about this because I feel like the American people are being played with.
Yeah.
I think these two political parties have taken us more as a joke. I've been calling D.C. all day, and all I'm getting is, oh, we can pass the message on to your representative. Well, hell, if I can't talk to my representative and my representative's in the chamber, what the hell is he doing?
Yeah. They're running a scam on us, Linwood, and it's going to play out something like this if they can get anything out of the Senate. And that's a big if right now, and it's an increasingly large if as Trump threatens Alaska and threatens Dean Heller and a group of governors, including Sandoval of Nevada, just released a letter basically to say these were governors, state governors, saying to their representatives in the House and the Senate, don't go along with this unless don't do anything to knock out Medicaid in our states and things like that. But here's the scam that they're running. If they could get a bill out of the Senate that even simply said, we proclaim today National Health Care Day, the 27th of the month every year of every month will be Health Care Day. They take that bill, which has been passed by the senators by 50, well, if it has nothing to do, if it doesn't affect the budget at all, it could arguably, and it contains funding, money passing through, but it doesn't increase the deficit. It could be passed by budget reconciliation, which only requires 50 votes. It can't be filibustered. They send that now to what's called a House-Senate Conference Committee. And a conference committee actually meets in secret. And members of the House, members of the Senate get together in secret, and they basically write a whole brand new piece of legislation that reconciles the differences between the House-passed version, which strips 33 million people of their health care, cuts back on Medicaid, kneecaps basically, a large chunk of America. And the Senate version, which simply says, hey, it's a national holiday in this most bizarre example I'm giving you. They merge these two, so now you've got a piece of legislation that does all that awful stuff, and all the senators are saying, well, I never voted for that. Then once that comes out of committee, it cannot be amended, it cannot be filibustered. So it goes back to the House and it goes back to the Senate. And it only takes 50 votes in the Senate to pass. It takes a simple majority in the House to pass, and it becomes the law of the land when the president signs it. So that's
because just a 50 vote. It's only on budget reconciliation because nobody has explained the 60 votes and
the way around a filibuster is to say that you're selling something, you're pushing, you're promoting something that fits the rules of budget reconciliation. This is a relatively modern thing. I think Robert Byrd actually involved himself
30 or 40 years ago in writing the standards for reconciliation. And it just, you know, it can't contribute to the deficit, so it has to be revenue neutral or better. And this bill is. In fact, it's saving money for the government because it's throwing people off health care and, you know, refusing to subsidize them any longer. And therefore, it qualifies for budget reconciliation, which means that, and that it was intended so that the Congress could quickly pass things to deal with emergencies. You know, hey, we got to fund the military because we just got into a war and we need extra money, or we need extra funding for FEMA because there's a crisis going on in New Orleans or something. You know, so we can. I mean, that was the original idea of reconciliation, to be able to quickly and easily pass, you know, generally things that are not controversial. But this is how it's been corrupted. Linwood, I got to move along, but thank you for a great question. That was a good one. Trish in Somerville, South Carolina. Hey, Trish, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. First-time caller. Just wanted to talk to you about something that, you know, I've been seeing a lot of, which a lot of people are like, oh, you know, we're going to vote these people out in 2018 because they just, you know, proposing so many outrageous things. And, you know, my concern is that Russia is so far into our systems that they stand to simply replicate not only what happened in 2016, but just basically their own elections, you know, which are corrupt and geared toward one party only. And, you know, and it just seems to me that, you know, the Republicans that are, you know, putting obstacles in place, you know, to these investigations, you know, it almost makes me feel as if, you know,
this is Trish. This is the upside of Russia trying to meddle with our elections, right? Or, you know, whether it was the oligarchs or whether it was the government, or whether it was real or not, you know, whatever. The broad perception, and in all probability a real perception, but, you know, as I keep saying, we need a serious investigation of this. That Russia was trying to mess with our elections, provides us finally with the answer to the Republicans who say, oh, there's nothing wrong with electronic voting machines that are insecure and easily hacked. We love them. We keep getting elected on them. We like that red shift where we get 7 extra percentage points out of the electronic voting machines than we used to get on paper ballots. Now you can say, instead of, oh, my God, the Republicans are messing with our elections, you could say the Russians are messing with our elections. That freaks people out a whole lot more. At least it should freak out Republicans, if nobody else, although it doesn't seem to right now. And then, yeah, our election systems are insecure, not secure. And that needs to change. Whether, you know, and again, if the Russians could hack our voting systems, the Chinese can hack our voting systems. The Saudis right now are running ads here in Washington, D.C., targeting members of Congress, saying that Qatar is a state funder of terrorism. And they got a clip of Trump in there and other people saying that. You know, the Saudis right now spending money in the D.C. media market in order to influence our legislators. That's how crazy it's gotten, right? The country that is running a war against Yemen that, as of this moment, is you've got 600,000 people in Yemen on the verge of famine, and our news agencies will not even report on it. Well, maybe they don't have bureaus there. I don't know what the deal is, but it's one of the major humanitarian crises in the world, and we're not even talking about it. But this is, you know, foreign involvement in U.S. politics needs to come to an end, regardless of the level, regardless of where it's coming from. And you know, this is, I think, a wake-up moment. Trish, thanks for the call. Fred in Mission Viejo, California. Hey, Fred, what's up?
Well, I wanted to, hi, Tom. Thanks for taking the call. I'm a business owner, and I wanted to kind of talk about how single payer would relieve all this burden from small employers like myself, but also with that, getting rid of workman's comp. Because if we have single payer, we don't need workman's comp. It's such a fraud. And so if we could combine those two together, that would relieve so much tension from small business, allow us to pay our employees more. And I don't understand why the Democratic, you know, they come out with their new message, and it's so general and non-specific that it's really embarrassing.
Yeah, and this is a sales pitch, by the way, Fred, that could be used with Republicans. You know, I used to own an ad agency in Atlanta, and we were, I remember once, this was back in the mid-'80s, 1980s, or no, the mid-'90s, actually, the early 90s, that we hired a woman to work part-time with us. Basically, you know, we had a printing press in our place as well. We printed newsletters and things for people. And, you know, she was sort of a gopher. And she insisted on lifting heavy boxes. And Louise would follow around and say, don't lift that box. It's too heavy. That's a two-person box. Don't lift that box. She said, oh, I can do it. I can do it. She worked for us for like a week and then filed a workman's comp claim saying that her back had gone out because she lifted a box that was too heavy. We found out after we had paid the claim, or our insurance company paid the claim, but, you know, then the insurance company doubled or tripled our workman's comp payments, that we were the third company she had done this to. And, you know, it's like, who's going to prosecute? Who has the time? We just moved along. But there is fraud in workman's comp, tragically. And there's also people who deserve workman's comp who don't get it because the people think that they're being fraudulent. That whole dispute, that whole issue could be put to bed. You could say to you know, Republicans, yes, we're anti-worker fraud, so we're going to get rid of workman's comp by doing single pay. It's a brilliant suggestion, Fred, and I think it's a very saleable suggestion, one that, you know, we definitely should be promoting. There's a lot of good stuff that comes out of workman's comp. It also says, you know, or that comes out of single payer. With single payer, people are no longer afraid to leave their job and thus lose their health care and go off and start their own company. It's great for entrepreneurs. A single-payer health care is great for people who are stuck in dead-end jobs that they really would rather not do. They'd rather retire, for example. It opens up new job spaces for younger people. So there's all kinds of great stuff that comes out.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls, and we're going to check in with Talk Media News, too, in a few minutes. Welcome back. Troy tells me that Franz Kafka was a clerk in a workman's comp company. Oh, it's perfect. It's just perfect. Ali in Las Vegas. Hey, Ali, what's up?
What's going on, Tom? How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. So I got some not so nice comments about the LGBTQIA issues with the military.
Okay.
All right. So I just want to preface this whole conversation with saying that I'm definitely very LGBTQIA friendly. And I've been in the military. I was in the first Desert Storm in Kuwait. When a bullet is going past your head, no one is giving thought to, gee, I wonder if this person next to me, sleeping with the same sex, had a sex change, or wants a sex change. It's really not what you're thinking about at all.
Right.
So I'm not quite sure who deserves whatever medical treatment they need the most. A person who's going to either take a bullet for me, is willing to take a bullet for me, or to die on a battlefield for our country, than an LGBTQIA person. I don't know who deserves whatever treatment we can give them the most.
Right, and such people have died for this country literally since the Revolutionary War.
Absolutely. And, Trump and his whole family, no one has any military experience, so how would they know?
Right.
How would they know?
Yep, Trump with his bone spurs. I'm serious. It's now it's like all over the Twitterverse. They've released, or somebody got a hold of his actual petition to the draft board saying, I have bone spurs in my feet. I'm so badly disabled. There's no way I could serve in the military. I couldn't make it through basic training. And here's the x-rays. Apparently he found some doctor who had x-rays of somebody who actually had bone spurs, or he painted them in or something. Because if Donald Trump actually had crippling bone spurs, he wouldn't have been walking the way he's been walking these last 60 years.
No. And furthermore, I was pregnant in Kuwait and didn't know it.
Whoa.
So here I am walking around the desert, puking, and I was like, what is wrong with me? Well, I found out because we're 26 years later, and she's up walking fine. If I can serve pregnant, Donald Trump could have served with his fake phone first. So I'm just not understanding.
Well said.
In a war zone.
Yeah.
In a war zone.
Yeah. Did I mispronounce your name, by the way, when you first came on?
Who cares?
Well, tell me how to say it right so I do it next time if you call.
It's Allie.
Allie. Okay. Oh, that's great. It's a beautiful name.
Allie.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate everything you do. I love your show. I watch you on YouTube. I'm probably like a lightweight stalker, so
thank you, Allie.
All your social media and watch you on YouTube. Great job, and I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks so much, and thank you to you, and thank you for your service to our country. It's, boy, serving while pregnant, that's got to be a real challenge. Allie, thank you so much. It's remarkable. By the way, coming up at the top of the next hour, Chief Clarence Cox is going to be with us. He's the incoming president of the National, it's called NOBLE, N-O-B-L-E, the National Organization for Black Law Enforcement. And he's a former chief of police in Clayton County, Georgia. And this may well be a very interesting conversation. We'll see. He came through a friend of ours who is very conservative. I don't know Chief Cox's politics. We'll find out in about 10 minutes. So stick around. Up next, Victoria Jones. We're talking to you. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and on the line with us, Victoria Jones with Talk Media News. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, Ellen Ratner's new book. Victoria, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Great having you, as always. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful Thursday. So what's going on in the world today?
So the Department of Justice has filed court papers in a private suit arguing that a major federal civil rights law does not protect employees from discrimination based on sexual orientation. It's a case being considered by a New York appeals court. So it filed a brief in this case. It says pretty unusual for top officials in Washington to weigh in on gay rights in a essentially private dispute between a worker and his boss. Civil rights advocates are criticizing the filing not only for the arguments, but also for having been made on the same day that President Trump announced on Twitter that transgender people couldn't serve in the military or would be banned. The department's amicus brief was filed Wednesday. It's the case of Donald Zada, a skydiving instructor, who in 2010 was fired by his employer, a Long Island-based company called Altitude Express, and before taking a female client on a tandem dive, he told the woman he was gay to, get rid of any awkwardness that could arise from the fact that he would be tightly strapped to her during the jump. So the woman's husband complained to the company, and the company fired Zada, so he filed suit, claiming it had violated Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which bars discrimination in the workplace based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. But under Attorney General Jeff Sessions, the Justice Department has stepped in and says that every Congress since 1974 has declined to add a sexual orientation provision to Title VII. And says that the federal government, as the largest employer in the country, has a substantial and unique interest in the proper interpretation of Title VII, even though another federal agency, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, filed its own brief supporting Mr. Zada. The Justice Department brief claims that the EEOC was not speaking for the United States.
Whoa. So we have dueling Article II branches who are, oh man, this is a mess. And there, is it true that there's never been any clear adjudication of what the word sex means in Title VII?
I believe so, but this is, the articles are just starting to come out. BuzzFeed reported this first, and now the other newspapers are picking up on it.
Right. So discrimination against gay people in the workplace may soon be legal again. Oh, this is...
Depending which way this goes in the courts. Meantime,
Are we making America great again yet? Thank God.
You're going to get so tired of winning,
Yeah.
Tom.
Yeah. Well, the bigots are going to get so tired of winning.
Meantime, the General Joseph Dunford, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has written a letter to the military service chiefs saying that the military's policy permitting transgender individuals to serve remains in place, clarifying some of the confusion surrounding President Trump's tweets announcing that transgender people will no longer be accepted or allowed in the military. Dunford said the policy on who is allowed to serve will not change until the White House sends the DOD a rules change and the Secretary of Defense issues new guidelines. Dunford saying, in the meantime, we will continue to treat all of our personnel with respect. As importantly, given the current fight and the challenges we face, we all remain focused on accomplishing our assigned missions.
Is it? I've read a couple of places that when Trump tweeted his 3-tweet rant about transgender folks, that the first one basically said, "I've been talking to my generals and I've decided I'm going to do something," and then the second one said, "And what we're going to do is discriminate against trans people." But there was a 9-minute pause between the two, and apparently because he had never communicated what he was going to say to the Department of Defense, they had no idea what was coming, and there were a bunch of generals, like in the Situation Room or something, going, oh my God, is he going to say that we're nuking North Korea? Is that true?
I don't know whether that's true. Apparently, the Defense Secretary was told the day before. That's the amount of notice he got, but I don't know whether the generals were in the Situation Room doing that.
Or anywhere else.
I don't know. Maybe Sarah Huckabee Sanders could be asked that in today's briefing, and hopefully she won't threaten to end the briefing in frustration today.
Yes, as happened yesterday.
It happened yesterday. The briefing starts in about 10-15 minutes, so we'll find out.
Okay. So what else is going on in the world, Victoria?
Over in the Senate, they are the Republicans are looking at skinny repeal, which they're still defining. This is of the Affordable Care Act. They're not sure what that is, so they're figuring that out, having failed with repeal and replace. They want something. They're in 20 hours of debate. Then they go to the Vote-A-Rama tonight, where they have like rapid-fire amendments, and they'll probably be there all night.
Yeah, Jeff Merkley's bringing 100 of them.
Yeah, good for him.
Yeah.
I heard him being interviewed about this, but basically they're going to go all night or until they get so tired they can't go on. It's not clear what skinny repeal is, but the Congressional Budget Office has said that by 2021, which is 4 years, about 16 million people would lose insurance, and it will cost about 20% more to get coverage. That's in 4 years.
Right. Remarkable.
So that's quite significant.
Yes.
Quite significant. Senator Patrick Leahy and Senator Mike Lee, that's bipartisan if you ever heard of it.
Boy, is it ever.
Yeah, they're expected to unveil legislation today that will force the government to get a warrant to look at Americans' emails, according to 3 sources with knowledge of the bill. Yes.
Good. That's is this like an amendment to the Patriot Act or something?
No, it's the ECPA Modernization Act of 2017. It's to update the Email Communications Privacy Act of 1986. They've tried before. John Cornyn put the kibosh on it by saying that he wanted surveillance provisions favorable to law enforcement, which was effectively a poison pill because it said, well, yes, you can have what you want, but law enforcement can get in.
Right. Will this also prevent Google and other email providers from reading your email so they can figure out what you like, so they can figure out what to sell you with inline advertising?
I think that's a separate issue.
Okay. Fascinating. Victoria Jones with Talk Media News. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you so much.
Have a great afternoon, and have fun at the press conference. We'll be back with Chief Clarence Cox of the Black Law Enforcement, the National Organization for Black Law Enforcement. Take a look.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com. Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. With few exceptions, but this is page 176. With few exceptions, most Native American cultures did not have our notions as part of their collective mythos. Instead of the story that we're separate from creation and born to dominate it, these older cultures held a different view of the place of humans in the order of creation. They believe we are part of the world. We are made of the same flesh as other animals. We eat the same plants. We share the same air, water, soil, and food with every other life form on the planet. We are born into life by the same means as other mammals, and when we die, like them, we become part of the soil that will nourish future generations. They also believe it is our destiny to cooperate with the rest of creation. Every life form has its special purpose in the grand ecosystem, and all are to be respected, they believed. Each animal and plant has its own unique intelligence and spirit. We are permitted to compete with other plants and animals, but we may not wantonly destroy them. All life is absolutely as sacred as human life. Although hunting and killing for food are part of nature's order, when we do so, it must be done with respect and thankfulness. Older cultures are most often cooperators, not dominators. There are human cultures who do not engage in the destruction of the world. They demonstrate that destruction and domination are not an inevitable part of human nature. Prior to the emergence of younger cultures about 7,000 years ago, the anthropological record shows that not one culture believed itself to be separate from and superior to nature. We find the remnants of these older cultures in tribal people around the world, such as the San, the Kogi, the Ik of Uganda, the Navajo, the Hopi, the Cree, the Ojibwa, living in harmony with the world around them, the people around them, and seeing all life as sacred. The San Bushmen don't even qualify as Stone Age, since they've never used stone implements, only tools made from wood. And yet they were successfully pursuing their way of life 40,000 years before Aristotle, and they still are. They leave behind few traces, as they are such masters of resource management. That's sustainability. And contrary to the stories of our culture, it was and is often a happy and comfortable life. When we lived like that thousands of years ago, we enjoyed cradle-to-grave security. The tribe took care of itself. We cared for one another. If anybody had food, everybody had food. If anybody had a diseased child or an infirm parent, everybody had a diseased child or an infirm parent. The measure of wealth in such societies was security. Mediums of exchange like money were unnecessary. The idea of hoarding food or other things was unthinkable because everybody was responsible for everybody. Our ancient ancestors lived in the way of all other cooperator societies in nature, but be they the society of wolves or chimpanzees or prairie dogs, they looked out for one another. Our ancestors, people like you and me of all races and all continents, lived like this all over the world for 40 to 200,000 years, depending on whose archaeology you accept. And then there were eruptions among traditional cultures. In some parts of the world, people began to move away from their hunting and gathering lifestyle by experimenting with agriculture. This created more efficient food production, thus increasing their numbers and giving some people the ability to hoard food, the beginning of what we call wealth. Then a subgroup of the agriculturalists began experimenting with a new cultural idea of coercive or forced evangelism, of bringing others into their culture in a way that had never been done before. Their gods told them that if they couldn't evangelize others, then they should utterly destroy them. They were a very few, probably not more than a dozen tribes, which arose out of the tens of thousands of tribes that populated the planet. And this small number of tribes proceeded to wipe out and displace and destroy the thousands of other tribes who were living in a sustainable, peaceful, and connected to nature way. They left the garden and began to create dominating city-states and then empires. They were the first people infected with Wetiko, the origin of our younger culture. And because of this, they had become more efficient at increasing their own numbers. They had more sunlight under their own personal control. Of course, there was a price to pay for this. While the San, Kogi, Ik, and other native peoples may spend less than 2 to 4 hours a day gathering food and attending to the needs of life, and do to this day, by the way, in younger culture societies, this balance was radically shifted as average people must work longer and harder just to survive. Those who were the dominating individuals in the culture, however, could live luxuriously and work less and less. So for every person who only worked an hour or two a day, another person would have to work 4 or 8 or 10 hours a day or more. Without massive exploitation of resources or theft from others, for every person with 10 times as much wealth, 10 people must have only 1/10 as much. Social and economic classes were born, and the first governments came into being to define, order, and control the socio-economic structure and help the wealthy maintain and increase their riches. Whether they knew it or not, these governments, mostly kingdoms in the early days, transmitted younger culture values to all citizens, rich and poor. The power brokers of this time programmed the consciousness of their subjects, just as our governments, educational institutions, and mass media do today. Nobody knows what brought about the first eruption of Wetiko cultural insanity, but logic suggests it was most likely happened in places where food resources were only cyclically abundant. For example, the Tlingit and Weda Native American tribes of the Pacific Northwest and the area around Vancouver Island were apparently extensive traders and owners of slaves. And this was because they could store food. This is where it all began, beginning wealth. Anyhow, the book is The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. This is just a small dip into it.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with me is Chief Clarence Cox, the incoming president of the Nationalist Organization for Black Law Enforcement, NOBLE, the former chief of police of Clayton County, Georgia. NobleNational.org is the website, and you can tweet Chief Cox at Chief_Cox. Chief Clarence Cox, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much for joining us. Tell us about your organization, the National Organization for Black Law Enforcement, and what you all are up to right now with regard to policing and the policing culture in this country.
Well, obviously, we're one of the largest, if not the largest, black organization for law enforcement, and we founded in 1976. And we have approximately 3,500 members or so across the country, and that includes state, federal, county, and municipal agencies. We do a lot in our communities, and especially lately with some of the use of force issues. But one of the staple programs that we offer right now in our communities across the country is a Law in Your Community, where we engage with our citizens and try to explain a little bit about what's going on in our country as it relates to law enforcement. There seems to be a divide, unfortunately, and a lot of it has to do with some of the things that you've seen, the large incidents across the country. And we're working very hard and feverishly to try to change that optic and to educate our public on some things that would be helpful in those encounters.
Yeah. Now, in several of the fairly high-profile killings of unarmed black people in the United States over the last few years, there have been officers of color involved, and although it's, by and large been, white cops killing black civilians. But then we had this situation in Minneapolis a couple of weeks ago with a black cop killing a white woman. And a lot of the Sturm und Drang that seems to be coming out of that is that this isn't so much, although it very much is, but it's not so much
a problem of white policing against black people as it is that within police culture in the United States, and perhaps largely unique to the United States, this is not so much found, as Michael Moore documented in his movie Where to Invade Next, in European countries. There is this culture of violence itself, that it's not black or white, it's blue. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, one, the thing that has changed the optics, if you will, is the advancement of technology. I would submit that some of these incidents have occurred over the years since law enforcement's inception. And if you think about the many agencies across the country and the percentage of these types of encounters, it's very little. It's not as much as people would tend to believe. It's just highly publicized now because of smartphones and other technology that's able to capture these events and make them look the way they do. And certainly we're not proud of some of the conduct some of the officers have displayed. And, as you mentioned, the thing in Minneapolis, we're not happy about that one either. And until that's concluded or an investigation is completed, I won't make any comments personally or professionally on what I thought happened there. But certainly there needs to be an investigation, and I think the mayor was in the right perspective to do some of the things that have already been done. The acting chief has instituted a policy that all officers will engage their body cameras at the inception of the calls. I think that will be a little bit of a helpful measure. But certainly we've got a lot of work to do. And I think what has happened is we've dehumanized policing and police officers. As we talk about things like this, we talk about the fact that these are happening in the communities. But if you think deeper in this, we are members of the community, and somehow somebody forgot about that. Somebody forgot that we are part of the community, and a lot of these issues hurt us as much as they hurt the public who screams and protests about it.
Yeah.
We're just sworn to uphold the law, and we do our best to make sure that happens. But certainly we're not happy when we see incidents like this, whether they're white or black.
Yeah, I have been saying, I have some general familiarity with law enforcement. I was writing some novels about private detectives and ended up going through the Georgia Police Academy program back in 1998, I think it was.
Oh, okay.
And one of my best friends who got me into that program was a police chief, DeWitt Wanamaker. I don't know if you know him, from Georgia, rural Georgia.
Right.
And I've had run-ins with the law in my life too, and as most people have, and it strikes me. What I've been saying for years, and particularly since that experience of going through the police academy, was that our teachers hold our future in their hands, and our cops hold our present, the quality of life of our present, in their hands, and neither one of them are respected or paid enough. Number one. And arguably, and particularly with regard to police, not so much teachers, they're not held accountable enough by the local communities. In fact, there's not even a mechanism for it in the case of police, or if there is, it doesn't seem to work all that well. What are your thoughts on how policing in the United States can be reformed so it's less reactive and less violent and more more community-centered, more compassionate? Sounds like too weak a word, but I think you know what I'm trying to get to.
I know exactly what you're saying, and I'm glad you brought that question into this interview. One of the greatest tools that I've seen of late has been the task force, the 21st Century Policing Task Force that the former President Obama created, and that was to dive in to some of these issues to find out what it is that is causing some of these use of force issues, some of these mistrust problems that we have in the community. And I felt that was probably the best tool that we've seen in the last century, and it has been since watered down a bit since the new administration has come into office, and some of the things that were put in place, like the Baltimore had some federal mandates that were in place, and they've been since removed. I think we're going to go backwards in a sense until we actually demand that we have some sort of police reform. And certainly, I agree with some of the points you bring out about the pay and the respect. But one of the first things that I was told when I was in the academy back in the early 80s was, if you came into this job to be rich, then you need to get up and leave the room. Yep. And so, this is not a job that, we're going to get paid a whole lot of money, and most of us know that coming into this. So you either got to do it because something you love to do, or you just can't find something else to do.
But it should be a good job. I mean, in Norway, doctors make around $120,000 a year, and so do cops.
Right.
But you got to be a college graduate to be a police officer in Norway. I mean, why can't we raise standards and raise pay in this country? What's wrong with us that we can't do that?
Well, it's sort of like, if you remember, shortly after 9/11, the government put a lot of unfunded mandates onto local jurisdictions, and they just soon went away because it was bankrupting normal jurisdictions. And I think when you start putting those mandates, if you don't put money toward those mandates, then they're just no good. They're not as good as the paper that you wrote them on. So when we look at some of the things that people are asking for in the criminal justice system, you got to think cops are put in a position where they have to make decisions rapidly, obviously, but we're also dealing with other things. We're dealing with mental health issues. We're dealing with, anytime something's wrong in a household, the first thing the household owner or the, whoever's in charge, they dial 911. And, a lot of times those problems aren't something that's germane to a law enforcement issue, but they become a law enforcement issue because when we arrive, somebody expects us to do something.
Well, and half the people in our prisons are mentally ill.
Right.
I mean, we're dealing with a mental health crisis with guns.
And
it's
you
crazy.
Remember the early 80s with the war on drugs, that kind of went away, and now we're back almost in that same position with the expansion of opioid drugs that are,
right.
We got a lot of prescription drugs that are hitting the streets and kind of overriding the illicit drugs, the methamphetamine, the cocaine, and the things that you see. They're being kind of outweighed by prescription drugs. So as we look at our future, we've got to put some things in place to try to combat a lot of the issues that are not necessarily law enforcement. We got to look at our entire criminal justice system. That's not something that a police officer on the street or administrator of a police agency can change. It has to be a collective and involved effort to change this whole perspective of our justice system.
Yeah. It's so very, very well said. Chief Clarence Cox, it has been a pleasure and an honor talking with you, sir, today. The incoming president of the National Organization for Black Law Enforcement, noblenational.org is the website. You can tweet him at Chief_Cox. Chief Cox, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Tom. Glad to be here.
I really appreciate it. Very thoughtful conversation. It's marvelous, and I wish you the very best in everything you're doing. We will be right back with your calls, my thoughts, and the news of the day right after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more right after this. And welcome back. It is 16 and a half minutes past the hour, and Chaz in Lakewood, Washington, watching us on Free Speech TV via Roku. Hey, Chaz, what's on your mind today?
Nazadrovia, comrade.
Yeah, right. What's up, Chaz?
Let's talk about the quote-unquote transgender ban. And as it turns out, it looks like the DOD is saying, we don't know nothing about this transgender ban.
That's what they're saying, yep.
Now, this $2 million a year that supposedly would be dedicated towards transgender support, that's probably what, annual?
Yeah, $2 million a year. Last year we spent $84 million on erectile dysfunction drugs, Viagra and whatnot.
We also spend $2 million a week on.
What?
That's the Don going to Mar-a-Lago.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, so we spend more in a week for Donald Trump to take his weekend vacations than we spend in all of the the medical support of our trans troops.
Yesterday,
mind-boggling.
See, I live next. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry, Chaz. Go ahead.
Yesterday, I live next to a joint base up here in the Northwest, and I talked to 4 service members in passing as I was trying to work my way to the commissary. I asked them, how does the transgender ban, how would having a transgender support soldier affect you? The 2 lower enlisted said, wouldn't affect me at all. The 2 other senior enlisted or officers, I can't tell with the Air Force uniforms, they said, we don't know what the heck is going on.
Yeah, I have several friends who are in the military, neighbors, whatnot, and there's a lot of head scratching going on right now.
Now, this is kind of a weird notice I've made, is that I seem to see a lot of retired transgender folks aboard military bases. I don't know if it triggers something. Maybe a study needs to be done. But, the Don could care less about transgender, I'm sure, because of the promises he made in his campaign. I think that...
But one of the promises he made, Chaz,
was the last person to talk in his ear.
Yeah, but one of the promises he made, and he made it in a big press thing, holding a rainbow flag, was that I'll be the best president for the LGBT community ever, right?
And that's the only promise he's ever broken, right?
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, we should have known. I mean, he's lied about everything. He said he was going to bring jobs back. He lied about it. He said he was going to defend our natural spaces. He lied about it. He said he was going to give us health care for everybody in the United States. He lied about it. He said he was going to blow up our trade agreements that are stripping us of our jobs. He lied about it. He said he was going to do something about immigrants coming into the United States. Not only did he lie about it, but he just applied to the federal government for another 100 or so foreign immigrants to work at Mar-a-Lago and his golf course in New Jersey, because he thinks it's really elegant to have people with a foreign accent serving you your dinner. He'll
never play as much golf as Obama did, right?
Yeah, right. This is another one of his promises. He said, I'll be so busy being president, I won't play golf like Obama.
Thank you, Tom. I'll be standing by.
Thanks a lot, Chaz. Good talking with you. It's just general craziness. I mean, it's just, I don't know how to describe it beyond that. It's this administration. It's nuts. Anyhow, we'll be back. Stick around. It's coming up on 20 minutes and a half past the hour. We'll be back.
Hi, I'm Valerie with Free Speech TV. We're proud to provide you with independent, unfiltered news and documentaries. And as our valued viewer, you can help us continue bringing Free Speech TV well into the future. Join our Pearly Gate Rebels, our planned giving program. Your gift of any size will help ensure democracy endures through an informed citizenry. You can donate property, money, or assets. It's easy. My spouse and I are proud Pearly Gate Rebels. We're doing our part to ensure that Free Speech TV will be here to deliver thought-provoking news and information well into the future. Join us. Call 877-378-8669 or email me at valerie@freespeech.org. Rebel against media owned by billionaires and become one of our Pearly Gate Rebels today.
Welcome back. Stan in Atlanta, Georgia, listening on Sirius XM. Hey, Stan, thanks for the call. You wanted to talk about policing?
Sure. Hey, Tom. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Stan.
You're one of the highlights in progressive media in the world, and contrary to the lie that most of the media is conservative, you and I both know that's a lie, and you're one of the few outlets. Getting into my topic, I just want to talk about, I was trying to talk to Chief Cox and put a bug in his ear, and basically, as an African-American attorney here in Georgia, I just want to say that he is relieving himself in the wind if he's not to face the fact that racism is not just color, it has to do with structure. So if you were to ever do anything, you'd have to change the court systems, the judges, perception of police officers. You have to change the jury. You have to get actual African Americans on the jury. And then, I mean, I guess that's just one aspect. The other aspect is your brilliant comment about policing the police, or even how you kind of choose who's going to be your police. In Norway, as you've made the observation, it's higher pay. These are college graduates, versus in America, it seems that the typical policeman to me is the flunky that could not make the varsity football team, so he has a chip in his shoulder. He's not very aware of his surroundings, not very astute racially. He hasn't had a whole lot of intermingling with people of different races, of people of color. So his initial reaction is one of aggression, and it's just not a fair community type of interaction. So he's not meeting with Mrs. Smith. He's meeting with Tyrone, the terrorist, or some guy that's a complete foreign entity to him versus another American. So there's a lot of aspects that have to be worked on if we're going to do any change in policing of people of the color of America, or policing in general in America. Agreed. Very. Go ahead, Sam. I think lastly, though, I think my last comment, and comment on this one, I think that obviously the person of color policeman in Minneapolis, he'll definitely go down, and this will either be a start for change or just another missed opportunity. So
I suspect it's going to be the latter. Although Minneapolis is a pretty progressive community, they'll probably deal with it just as it is, rather than as an issue of race. But when it first happened, I went on the air, and the sick joke basically was, well, finally we're going to see a cop held to account for killing an unarmed civilian, because in this case the cop was black and the civilian was white. The script got reversed. It's tragic that kind of a comment is even might resonate in this country right now. It's tragic.
Yeah, and to piggyback your comment, it's just absurd that the typical line of defense that we see, if it's a black victim, like, oh, well, he cut school in third grade, or he didn't recycle. Like, you have not seen that. You've seen the opposite. Yeah. You've seen her character get bolstered, and you've seen the cop's character get diminished. So it's just complete 180 of the typical shooting.
Yeah, so. And I think that whether that is reflecting a conscious racism or just the fundamental racial bias that is built into our system since the founding of this nation, and built into arguably Western culture since it was basically invented 7,000 years ago in what's now Iraq, which to say that literally from 7,000 years ago until about 100 years ago, 150 years ago, slavery was the norm in the countries that called themselves Western civilizations. And, was widely accepted. It's in the Bible and all that sort of thing. So, we are dealing with a really deeply ingrained legacy here, Steve.
Definitely. And it's one which will not go away instantaneously, but it's going to, we have to chip away for it it seems like a century now, basically where we're at.
Yeah. Well, it's been, in fact, longer than a century, certainly, that we've been pushing back on it. Stan, thank you for the call. Very, very well said.
Tom. Thank you for your network. Thank you so much, Tom.
Good talking with you. Thank you. And this is, this whole thing of policing, I can't recommend strongly enough that you watch Michael Moore's movie, Where to Invade Next. It's absolutely brilliant. And he goes and he visits the jails in Norway. And it's just like, whoa, it was the moment in the movie where I had tears in my eyes. I strongly commend that movie to you. I think it's on Netflix or Hulu right now, maybe, or on Amazon. I'm not sure exactly where, but you can find it online. Where to Invade Next by Michael Moore. It is so good. And there are so many good lessons there.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with more of your calls, the news of the day, and my thoughts on all the above right after this.
Thom Hartmann here with Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became People and How You Can Fight Back. This is from page 218. The subhead is, If Corporations Are Persons, Why Aren't There Crimes in the Crime Statistics? Every year, the Federal Bureau of Investigation issues a press release on its Uniform Crime Reporting Program, which determines the nation's crime index. It reports crimes by persons, which excludes, strangely enough, corporate persons, even when the corporations have been convicted of felonies. In its entire history, the FBI has never issued a report on crimes by corporate persons, although its reports on crimes by human persons are well-researched and well-publicized. The upshot of this is that when you ask people how most money and property are stolen or how most people are killed, they think of burglars and muggers and bank robbers and crimes of passion. They think of human persons. The reality, though, is that more money and property are stolen by or lost to corporate criminals than to human criminals. Russell Mochaber's corporate crime reporter noted that in 1998, when the FBI estimated robberies and burglaries at almost $4 billion, the cost of corporate crimes was in the hundreds of billions, as it is every year. These include security scams that ran around $15 billion that year, car repair fraud that hit around $40 billion that year, insurance swindles and corporate fraud found on your health insurance, HMO, and hospital billings that runs between $100 and $400 billion a year, 100 times greater than all the burglaries in the country combined. Then there are the occasional really big crimes like Neil Bush's savings and loans scandal that then Attorney General Dick Thornburgh called the biggest white-collar swindle in history, or the actions of banksters and defense contractors that get no investigations whatsoever from either the Bush or the Obama administrations. More people die as a result of corporate activity than because of the actions of deranged killers or overwrought spouses. According to the Corporate Crime Reporter, the FBI reported that 1998 saw about 19,000 Americans murdered at the hands of other people. But that same year, 56,000 people died from work-related diseases like black lung and asbestosis that went unreported by the FBI. And many times that number died from the silent violence of pollution, contaminated food, hazardous consumer products, and hospital malpractice. Much of the human death caused by corporate activity has arguable benefits. For example, the many cancers caused by compounds associated with plastics or pesticides. But the cost of these deaths isn't factored into the unit cost of the products. So there's no financial incentive for industry to develop toxin-free or toxin-reduced alternatives or to use the more expensive but less toxic alternatives that already exist. This is a process known as internalizing profits and externalizing costs. The corporation profits from the toxins, and the public pays for the cancers, both in healthcare costs and lost productivity from sick and dying workers. It's been a standard operating procedure for centuries and was pushed back against for only a few decades in the 1960s and 70s with the consumer movement that came out of the publication of Rachel Carlson's book Silent Spring and Ralph Nader's book Unsafe at Any Speed. Since the Reagan administration, however, dumping externalities on the public has become a common and accepted practice across the business spectrum. One of the easiest ways to do it is to simply move the toxin-producing or toxin-using factory or process to a country with lax environmental and labor laws like China or Vietnam, so that not only are labor costs lowered, but more importantly, the cost of dealing with externalities like workman's compensation from injury and exposure and toxic emissions and death in the workplace, so that all those costs drop to zero or close to it. And then there are the big mistakes. In 1998, one of America's largest meatpacking companies replaced a refrigerating unit on one of its processing lines. Shortly thereafter, the detectors it had in place on the line to look for the deadly cold-loving bacteria like Listeria monocytogenes started to react, indicating high levels of bacterial contamination. The company's response was immediate. Carolyn Smith DeWall of the Center for Science and the Public Interest told reporters Russell Mochaber and Robert Weissman, quote, "Then their studies started coming up positive, so they stopped testing. This company's Fourth Amendment right to privacy blocked surprise inspections by the government." They're a person, right? The detectors were apparently turned off for a full month before the Centers for Disease Control frantically tried to find the source of the bacteria that was killing people, mostly children, all over the United States. Used DNA fingerprinting to track the bacteria that was causing the nationwide outbreak of Listeria back to the plant, provoking a nationwide recall of millions of pounds of the product. But during that month, hundreds of people consuming this company's products were sickened by Listeria, and 21 humans died from it. U.S. Attorney's Office, according to Mochaber and Weissman, said, quote, there was insufficient evidence to bring a felony charge against the company. Instead, the company paid a $200,000 fine and issued an unprecedented joint press release with the Bush administration's USDA that managed to say that the company had paid the fine without ever mentioning the brand name of the product that had contaminated and caused the deaths. This is truly amazing. I mean, corporate crime costs us more and kills more people, and we don't even talk about it. It's amazing. Anyhow, the book is Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became People and How You Can Fight Back.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All the important stories we cover and the issues we care about are at HartmannReport.com. Members of our community can comment and join the conversation.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Marvin in Minneapolis. Hey, Marvin, what's on your mind today? Thanks for listening to AM 950 there. KTNF.
Thanks for taking my call, Tom. First-time caller, long-time listener. I actually met you in Minneapolis at the Blue State Ball.
Oh, great.
In March of 2017.
Oh, marvelous.
So I was listening to your show on AM 950, and I have my own opinions about the shooting, the civilian shooting. This happened, week ago? Saturday?
Maybe two, yeah.
With Jeanette Dumont. And I know I'm part of the Our Revolution Twin Cities, and I'm a big-time Democrat. And we actually have one candidate who was endorsed by the Our Revolution Twin Cities group, Raymond Dean. He actually came out and he says we have to demilitarize our cops to the best of our ability. They have access to their weaponry, but not carry it at all times, which I think is a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can give a plug out to Raymond Dean, that would be great. Because
I think you just did, Marvin.
He's a wonderful guy. I've known Ray for the last 6-7 years, and he's got a great story, and he is on top of things. He used to be a state representative from North Minneapolis, so
yeah,
he knows about the Jamar Clark and shootings and everything. So we actually have a candidate here in Minneapolis that is talking of what makes sense in terms of criminal justice and social justice and racial justice. So I just want to add my 2 cents here.
Great. Okay. Marvin, very good. Thank you very much. Excellent points all. Jack in Derby, Kansas. Hey, Jack, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Jack? Jack, you got to listen on your phone, not your computer. Okay. So call back. Leon in Crete, Illinois. Hey, Leon, thanks for listening to WCPT. What's up?
Oh, hi, Tom. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Okay. You know what? For a while, what's really upsetting me is this the voter suppression. And I keep thinking if they make this like the law of the land, it's going to be like the end of everything. And a few days ago, I heard somebody on the radio come up with an idea that was new to me, and they were talking about no taxation without representation. And he said that American citizens who had the right to vote taken away from them shouldn't have to pay taxes.
How about no tax breaks without representation? It's like no tax breaks for the billionaires until all of us can vote.
Good idea, yeah. And I was thinking, if some of the congressmen or senators could bring that up, or even if somebody could organize like a class action lawsuit, get all these tens of thousands of people together, and just sue and do something like that. It was a great idea. I thought that's why I wanted to call you up and mention it.
Yeah, that's a good one, Leon. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Good talking to you, Pete in Espanola, New Mexico. Hey, Pete, what's on your mind?
Thanks for taking my call, Tom. I'd like to challenge the assumption that in policing that all it needs is reform. I think the system is actually working the way it was designed to do. It's incarcerating 2 million, 3 million American citizens. It's giving the cops the ability to take your property away on the mere accusation that you've committed a crime. And I really think the system is actually functioning the way it was designed, and mere reforms are not going to change anything until we actually...
So if we were going to tear this down and start over from scratch, Pete, what would you do?
What I do?
Well, you have this. I don't disagree with your opinion, by the way. But I don't know what to do with it other than, kind of an incremental thing, which is what the Northern European countries did, which is higher pay, higher standards, greater accountability. Which sounds to me like reform rather than, fundamental restructure. What would you do?
Well, the first thing we should do is take the profit motive away from policing and the profit motive away from incarceration.
Oh, absolutely.
As long as corporations are making $30,000 to $50,000 per citizen incarcerated, well, yeah, there's a profit motive for that, and there's also a profit motive for recidivism.
Yeah. So we do away with for-profit jails. We do away with for-profit policing. I would say we need to break the link between the police in this country and the military that was inserted there by Ronald Reagan with the, I think it's called the 1099 program, where 1033. Yeah, okay, I'm thinking of the IRS form. The 1033 program that recycles military equipment, right, in many cases straight from the defense contractors to local police departments. All of these things. Good ideas, Pete. Pete, thanks a lot for the call. Van in Gordonsville, Virginia. Hey, Van, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thank you very much for your being a genius out there and trying to keep light on everything. It's in this dark world we're in. Well, one thing, global warming, people say, oh, I like warm. Climate change, well, change happens all the time. It's climate instability. I think that's what's the most important way to present it.
Yeah, climate chaos.
Up to it.
How about climate chaos?
Climate what?
Chaos, C-H-A-O-S.
That's good, too. I like that.
Because that's really what we're looking at. I mean, when you're looking at, just wild storms, severe winds, hail when in places where it normally doesn't fall, tornadoes in places that normally don't have them, hurricanes and typhoons that are 2 and 3 times larger than typical, and the melting of the planet's refrigeration and climate stabilization system, aka the Arctic. And you look at all this stuff, it's chaos, and it's throwing lives into disorder. I mean, one of the main reasons that the Arab Spring happened was because Russia had a famine. Not quite a famine. They had a major crop failure. Well, no, it was Russia. And then, there was this huge heat wave that swept across, principally Russia. It hit a lot of Europe, too. But Russian wheat production was cut by at least a third. And as a result of that, the Russian government said, we are not going to export wheat this year. Well, guess where they were exporting their wheat to? Syria, Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, et cetera. And all of a sudden you got the Arab Spring. Well, why do you have the Arab Spring? Because the price of wheat doubled and everybody eats, pitas and things. It's like, wheat is a staple food. People were, they couldn't afford to eat anymore. Or they could eat, but they couldn't afford other things. And that's global warming. So, you could, in a very real way, the Arab Spring and the whole meltdown in Syria, which was caused, again, by the desert moving south in Syria, a million farmers having to losing their farms and traveling into the big cities in Syria. All of this stuff is being driven in part, in some cases in large part, by global warming. And until we start acknowledging that and having a conversation about it in the media, this climate chaos, spot on, Van. We need to be, I think, a little more drastic in our messaging. Thank you very much. Becky in Mansfield, Ohio. Hey, Becky, what's on your mind today?
Well, I have a concern. I listen to Progressive. I call my Senator Portman often and let him know how I feel about things. But what I'm concerned about, and I've heard about, and maybe you can shed some light on this, is, and I'm not sure if Sessions is pushing this, bouncing people off of the voter rolls. If they show up on the quote rolls more than once, they bounce you, they completely eliminate your vote.
Yeah, there's a great piece in the Washington Post today.
I've moved several times. Sure, I've been registered in different cities, but of course in Ohio, you have to show your photo ID to vote. So how can they say I'm going to try to vote in 2 or 3 other places? Maybe you can shed some light on this.
Becky, they don't believe it. They know that their whole story is BS. They know this. Okay. This is just the story that they have to have. I mean, it's just like back in the
in the old Jim Crow days, instead of now we got James Crow ESQ, as Joe Madison likes to say. Back in the old Jim Crow days, they would say, well, we have to have these literacy tests because we don't want dumb people voting. It would screw up our democracy. Or we've got to have this poll tax because you want people who have some skin in the game. You know, they always come up with a reason for their racism and for their tampering, they're rigging the electoral system so that they can retain power. They always come up with an excuse, and the excuse now is there's a whole bunch of people out there who are voting twice, or are or not even citizens and are voting, and they know that it's a lie. Donald Trump knew it was a lie when he said it. They all know it's a lie, but this is the only way the Republican Party can hang on to power is by gerrymandering and suppressing the vote of people who are going to vote for Democrats, and that's what they're doing. And
is there anything we can do?
Raise absolute holy hell, particularly with your Democratic members of the House and Senate. Raise holy hell with them about, the right to vote. And when they start pushing back and when the country starts pushing back, I was very pleased today to see an article in the Washington Post basically channeling Greg Palast. The Washington Post took Chris Kobach's interstate cross-check list and actually looked at the people. And they said 199 out of 200 cases where Kobach said this person is voting twice or this person is illegally registered, it was total nonsense. 199 out of 200. And the remaining 1 out of 200, and this was, out of 2 million, that would be, 199,000 or whatever. It's just, and the remaining person was still in doubt. This is probably nothing wrong with this person. More people in the United States every year die from having televisions fall on their head than vote twice or vote illegally. It just pretty much doesn't happen in this country. And the Republicans are not going to do anything about this. This is their bulwark, right? This is their levee that's holding back the tide of the Democratic hordes. And so they're not going to let go of it, Becky.
Well, and even if I contact my Board of Elections and say, we have things in place, and, are you allowing this? Is there somebody from higher up that's pushing them to do that? I guess I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, the Board of Elections doesn't have the.
How are they doing this, or are they trying to?
They're doing this at the level of Secretary of State, principally, and it's only happening in the red states, in the Republican-controlled states. They're the ones who've signed on for interstate cross-check, and for obvious reasons. And it's happening mostly in the Republican states that have large African-American populations. Not so much in North Dakota, lots and lots in South Carolina. So that's what's going on, and because it's happening at the level of Secretary of State, that means that we need to get Democrats into state office, into governorships and Secretary of State positions. Number one, and number two. We need to have Democrats at the federal level do something about this, create some federal standards for voting that the states can follow, that all the states can follow, so that this kind of voter suppression doesn't happen anymore. I mean, this is so wrong. This is so crazy. It's wrong. Becky, thank you for the call. This lie. I mean, this is the most monstrous lie, I think. Well, there have been a number of them in my lifetime. There's a WMD in Iraq. That was a pretty monstrous lie. Probably 500,000 people died as a result of George Bush telling that lie. But, this lie, this is killing us as a society.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's killing democracy. That's what it's doing. It's killing democracy. And we've got to wake the Democrats up to this. Send them Greg Palast's video. And welcome back. Lowell in Salem, Oregon, watching Free Speech TV on cable. Hey, Lowell, what's up?
Hey, Tom, I just wanted to remind you of, kind of a rant you had a little while ago, or, a few months ago about Donald Trump distracting. And he grew up, or, he spent a lot of time in WWE, which is expert at distracting, from...
This is the wrestling.
Wrestling. So it's he's an expert at distracting. So this transgender attack appears to get his healthcare thing off the news.
Right.
You know,
plus the
100%.
Russia investigation, plus, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
And, you know, speaking of WWE, you know, and kind of correlating to that, you know, Chuck Schumer had that party in the Hamptons with at Lally Weymouth's place, and they had Jared Kushner and them there at the same party. You know, so, you know, the rich kind of do the same WWE kind of a thing.
Sure.
They pretend to fight in front of us, but then they all party together later.
Yeah.
So,
well,
you know,
I'm not sure that that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the party in the Hamptons was pretty tone deaf, shall we say. But I would like my legislators to hang out with each other, to talk to each other, to party together, to know each other. I think that that's been the norm in American history more than the exception. I don't think that it's healthy for our republic for Democrats and Republicans to view each other as absolute enemies in all regard, period, you know, world without end, amen. And that's what happened when we elected our first black president, was the Republicans decided that, you know, they really were going to pander to the racist vote, and they were going to use that racist vote to gain control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. And they did. It took them 8 years, but they did. And they blocked everything they could that President Obama was doing, and including nominating appropriately and legally, nominating a guy who was arguably a Republican, you know, or at least a moderate to the Supreme Court. No, they had to have a right-wing crazy. They had to have Neil Gorsuch, who's farther to the right than anybody else on the court. And it's just, I think that some comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y, not E-D-Y, among our legislators would be a good thing, Lowell. Your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, yes, but, you know, my problem is, you know, they're partying with the rich, which,
right.
You know, and this is why, you know, going back to that one study that showed that, you know, the demands of the rich get passed
legislatively, yes.
Legislatively.
And the demands of the bottom 90%, the probability they're getting passed are equal to random noise.
Yes, and that's where, you know, the major problem comes in.
Yeah. So if we were to view the party in the Hamptons as a sign of class privilege and class warfare rather than as, you know, wimpy Democrats or hypocritical Republicans, that would be probably a more accurate portrayal?
Yeah, and that's why I was trying to put that to the WWE comparison, because there are a few rich billionaires that own the WWE. They have a bunch of people pretend to fight underneath them.
Yeah, you're right. And Linda McMahon is one of them. Isn't she now our Secretary of Labor? She's Secretary of something.
Exactly.
Yeah. It might be Commerce. No, Commerce is Wilbur Ross. Yeah, I'm not sure what she's Secretary of, but she's in Trump's cabinet. Anyhow, Lowell, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Linda McMahon is Secretary of the Small Business Administration. I was trying to remember what it was in just before the last break, and that's what it is. Tony in Loudonsboro, Alabama. Hey, Tony. Thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's up?
It's Lounsboro.
Okay, got it.
Hey, Tom, how's it going, man?
Good. What's on your mind?
Great show. Well,
thank you.
What's on my mind is I listen to your show, and I'm listening at all the resolutions to our problems and so forth and so on. What we need to do is take back, the people need to take back the power from these senators and these elected officials. We need to get up off of our tails and go and vote. Everybody that complains hadn't voted. Yeah, there are a lot of elections that are stolen, but we can't point our finger at anyone but ourselves. And I'm sick and tired of hearing it. We will not lend a hand to the people that need a hand lent to them.
But, Tony, when Scott Walker throws a couple 100,000 people off the voting rolls just before an election that Donald Trump wins by fewer than 20,000 votes, how is that our fault?
Well, it's our fault because a lot of people that were for Senator Sanders decided not to back Senator Clinton when she was made the person for the DNC. When she won, everybody was all upset with Senator Clinton because she's a liar and she's done this and she's done that. Now, in hindsight, I'm quite sure they want to eat some crow because they should have voted.
I don't think that Bernie lost the election for Hillary Clinton. I really don't. I think that Hillary Clinton and Robbie Mook and John Podesta lost the election for Hillary Clinton. And as Chuck Schumer said yesterday, they need to own that, and we need to move ahead. But I get what you're saying, Tony. We do need to make sure that not only we ourselves are registered to vote, but all of our friends and neighbors are. It's really important stuff. You're absolutely right. It's Civics 101, and you're spot on. Tony, thank you for the call. I got to move along here. Jesse in Long Beach, California. Hey, Jesse, what's up?
Wow, you took my phone call. I can't believe this. It's my first time ever calling. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, my quick question is this. I'll just listen on the air. What could have Hillary Clinton done if there's one thing she could have done to win the election? What would have it been?
It would have been to stop talking about Donald Trump.
Okay, could you elaborate further?
Yeah, I would encourage you to go to YouTube and Google Donald Trump's final campaign commercial. In the last 2 weeks of the election, Donald Trump ran a campaign commercial that was just a direct ripoff of Ronald Reagan's 1984 re-election campaign commercial. The Shining City on the Hill thing. They ran it during the last 2 weeks. They do negative advertising right up to that point, and then they say, and I'm going to make America great again, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. And watch that campaign commercial. If the Clinton campaign had run a commercial similar to that in those final 2 weeks, rather than a commercial that just had a whole montage of horrible pictures of Donald Trump and then saying the children are watching, there's no doubt in my mind they would have won. But because everybody in America knew how terrible Donald Trump was, they didn't need to spend $170 million on advertising to tell us that. Instead, they should have been spending that money on advertising, telling us what they were going to do. How they're going to, make America better. We weren't hearing a positive message. We were hearing a negative message. And negative messages tend to suppress the vote. That is, in fact, that's the principal purpose of negative messages, is to suppress the vote. And I think that the Mook and Podesta strategically blew this thing. They just blew it. And I remember those last 2 weeks watching those ads on TV, yelling at the television. That's not a reason to go out and vote. And, that Donald Trump gropes women. No, that's not, it's a reason not to vote for Donald Trump, but it's not a reason to vote for Hillary Clinton or the Democrats. And that's what we needed. And the good news is the Democratic Party has figured that out. And they're crafting a message. This whole better deal thing, is just the very beginning. It's very embryonic right now. But they have figured out that people want, and I think that's a good thing, a very positive thing that has come out of, and many of the Clinton people are very involved in this, and God bless them. And I campaigned for Hillary Clinton from the minute that she won the nomination until the day of the November election. On this program, every day I was promoting her candidacy. But it was frustrating given the advertising strategy, And I look at this as a guy who was the CEO of 2 different ad agencies, over a 15-year period, taught advertising and marketing to some of the biggest companies in America. This was lousy advertising. It was bad marketing. Jesse, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back tomorrow. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you. Get out there, get active, and as our 2 callers ago said, make sure you're registered to vote. Peg, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com.
pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242.
Or visit tomsbeets.com.